We need 6 mayors now.
Yeah, that makes, that's the third mayor since I've served. Yeah, for Dune City. Anita.
Wow. He's a great person.
And Tammy.
NGA terminal.
Is it updating? I'm still thinking.
I flew into, I flew maybe 2 o'clock from Hillsborough to Fairbanks. So we did that again 3 times actually. The coast. How are you, sir? Through Yukon.
We still have no news on the write-in.
I was wondering about that.
It'll be December 3rd or December 5th is the deadline.
What's coming up?
Some folks are the clown, Fred Flintstone.
So the new CalPERS may not be ready for January.
They will be.
They will be?
We'll know by December 3rd or 5th. And then we'll notify them, and then Kevin and I, Michelle, will do orientation in December, they'll be ready to go. Ready to go.
So
Hope they say yes.
Is there a deadline by when Lane County has to notify you?
It's December 3rd or 5th.
Okay.
Is the state deadline by which everything has to be certified
All
by that date.
electoral offices have to
The
get
entire
there.
state has to be certified by that date.
Pour your water out here.
Hello.
So you want everybody, so this isn't bomb, you want bombs dumped in this community right here, but it's so stupid.
I was like,
Who's got the joke?
yeah. So she said, well, she knows a 1, and I was like, oh, yeah. I agree. I trust everyone had a great Thanksgiving. Awesome. Yeah. Nice 4 days off.
It's actually, I work harder during the holidays and just getting stuff done around the house than probably any other time of year.
Right.
So,
I got surprised, so I sent a message to my mom today, because it's gonna be a very small holiday gathering at our house this year in December, and sent a message to my mom, I was like, hey, what would you think about like coming up here, and coming to Crestwell? And she was like, yes, like super fast, and so I was like, you've been waiting for me to ask about that.
Where does she live?
Just in, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just gonna be my aunt and my mom and maybe my stepdad, or not my stepdad, my dad-in-law. My dad-in-law lives here in Crestwell, so he'll probably be there. But they're both like an hour away, so we're right in the middle, so.
hard to have an excuse then if he lives right here.
We're gonna make it. Like,
You will invite him though, anyway.
oh yeah, we definitely invited him, yeah.
Hey, what are you guys doing?
And so he was the one that was like still holding out. I'm like, I don't know that I'll make it or not. I'm like,
Joey wait for the manager member?
She's sick. So she got a nasty cold. Talked with her today. She's
It's going around.
We're ready. We are ready to roll.
Perpetrators are just. He said. He had an alibi or
an additional material. And I guess that was bad.
So Michelle is quite sick with a cold. She will not be here tonight.
And then they cancel you.
We hassled her for a while this morning.
We talked to her on the phone, and she sounded really
Yeah.
bad. Yeah, really bad.
Take more time for yourself, more vacation, but
Don't spread it.
stay home.
Not necessary.
Been working so much, we're just going back to person. 407.
Good evening, welcome to the Creswell City Council Work Session, November 28, 2022. Would you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We are minus our city manager today, who is homesick. So Manager Amber is not with us. But we have a full council here and our staff members, so we're ready to go. Item number 1 is the mayor's report. First of all, City Council, I have registered us to walk in the Winter Lights Parade. So here's the information. It is Saturday, December 10th. The parade, so there's activities that day from 9 to 3, just so you know. Children's activities, music in the street, light parade, hot cocoa, cookies, vendor market from 9 to 3, all the activities. The parade starts at 5 o'clock. The staging area is Creswell Middle School. I will be there at 4:30 to make sure we're checked in. You don't need to be there till shortly before 5. But don't be late, okay? And it says, all entrants must include lights in their display. So last year, that meant I hung some kind of dangling light things around me and walked. And we're gonna walk. Now, you're welcome to bring family members, if you'd like, but we need to have a sufficient number of lights so that we're lighted up, okay? So plan to bring lights.
Is that a challenge?
I didn't intend it that way, but I have to go out and find some lights. So if you have lots of them, you know, and you want to share, that'd be fine. Some of the rules for the parade. If you want to hand out candy, you have to walk over to the sidewalk where the kids are at, not throw it. Do not spray water indiscriminately. I don't think we're going to do that. Keep a safe distance from the entry in front of you. I think that covers it. So if you'd like to walk with us in the parade, please be at the middle school, you know, around 4:45, the latest. I'll be there at 4:30, and when you get there, look for me. And we'll all line up, and we'll walk in the parade together. Okay? Next item is one that was brought to my attention by Curtis, our city planner. It has to do with the Safe Routes to School program. And there is a current project going on in Creswell that includes members of the school district. Curtis is involved in the committee. We have a consultant named Alta, A-L-T-A company. And so Curtis asked if there was anyone who's on the council who might be interested in it being part of this process. I said, well, maybe someone who's on the Public Works and Transportation Committee. So they've already met twice. And the purpose of this group is to recommend construction and education/programmatic improvements, prepare the community to collaborate around safe routes to school, identify projects for ODOT grants. They've already met twice. The meetings are all online. The next meeting is December 8th, which is a Thursday, 10 o'clock in the morning. So, if you're interested in being on that committee, he said there was some value in having city council representation so that if some things come down the pike towards creating some new sidewalks, some things that are safer for our kids to get to and from school, that a city council member could be a liaison, give reports on what's happening and kind of prepare us. If you're interested, then I have this information for you and talk to Curtis. So, Okay, so I'm gonna put this right out here. If more than one of you grabs it after the meeting, then that shows more than one interest. Okay? So now we go to committee reports. So first of all, Administration and Finance Committee. Do we have a report?
No report tonight, Mayor.
Okay? How about Public Safety Committee?
Yes,
Yes, we do.
we do. So, Public Safety Committee last met October 4th. And our last charge was to review or revise the emergency operations plan, which we did. The updates included Michelle Amberg's title. It was still her old title, so we revised that to make it current. And that's throughout the document. The two kind of big updates, the first one was adding a sample disaster declaration form.
We did.
Let me get to that page. So that is gonna be before the annex, after page 46, on the back side of that.
Do you have the new copy or the old copy? Because the older copy is what came in our packets.
Oh, okay. Then
I
not the
have-
revised one.
I have the copy dated April 5, 2022.
Okay, you were supposed to get the October one.
Yeah, it's the
Oh.
same.
Would you like
Did
to?
I think, did we all get the April 5 one?
Yes, I got the wrong.
We
I
all
have the
got
older
that one.
Okay.
I have October because I was.
In
Because you're on the committee.
Committee, okay.
Okay,
I'll ask Michelle if she can send the October one.
so we'll all need to get it.
Yes.
Minus you and Tammy. And who else on that committee?
Norma Jean?
Norma Jean. So you have the updated copy.
I
as well.
was in Bend on the
Uh,
4th of October.
I believe it was sent via email.
Oh,
Correct.
okay, all right, then I missed it.
So this is page 46 that tells us what's to be developed.
It's the resolution number. The next page. So it was an insert, it's a sample disaster declaration form.
Okay?
And the back side is the example of the resolution, of a sampled resolution for that.
Okay.
We can pass it around if
We sure
you
can.
want. Yeah,
Yeah,
here's just that page.
there you go.
Which page is it again?
Page 46.
After 46, so I guess it would be
Before the
47,
annexes.
yes.
Yeah.
And this next page. Right there. Okay. Why don't you show that to Shelley there too?
They have a
Okay.
copy over there. So that was inserted.
Okay?
So the front of that sheet and the back of the sheet. The second was in the annex in the back, there was an added pandemic.
Oh, okay.
Before it was your very last page and it was to be developed. So that was something that was developed during our last safety committee meeting. And that was the updates that we included. Well, the last one is we revised this section for, if you were to look in the beginning of the document where it talks about the different pharmacies, businesses, we updated those different community profiles. Because there's been some changes with medical, pharmacy, and that, it would be page 12.
Yeah, we had to take off by Mart and add
Health Mart.
And was the other new pharmacy added too, or is that too new?
Yeah, we added it.
New one out by
Yeah.
Mart.
Yeah, I had questions like, is Peace Health in Cottage Grove still considered a hospital? Because it's listed as nearest hospital. And then I noticed our population probably has, I think it's closer to 6,000 now, and a couple, maybe other little things. But it looks
Oh,
like
yeah.
you guys covered a lot of the
Yeah.
We
things
did fix
that,
the population.
We did do that.
Yes, we did do that.
yeah.
And I
so-
think we did leave Cottage Grove as the closest hospital.
Yeah.
I believe we did.
I think they do ER type things, but.
But not past
they're-
that.
Yeah, So I
So
don't
maybe
know.
that's something to think
I don't know how
about.
important that is. I just thought it was one of the things that I had.
Sure.
But yeah, you get the great work done. It sounds like you covered most of the things that I've thought of.
Yeah.
I saw city administrator, you changed that, but then there's also the mention of a council administrator form of government, and so that would change to council manager, and then everywhere else that administrator popped up.
Right.
Yep.
We just had her go through the whole document and change that.
Okay, I'm gonna look real quick to see if there was any other things that I had noted, just to you guys. Do we still have, I made a note to ask about Teen Cert. Do we still have Teen Cert going here in Crestwell? Do we
As
know?
far as I know, we do.
Same here.
They just got inactive during COVID.
Okay. Because they're listed as our only emergency trained citizens, so we'll make sure that we still have that going for sure.
I can answer that from the budget perspective. We do have a
We
budget
do. Okay,
allocation
good.
for that, so
Yeah.
it's my understanding it's still active.
And I was, sorry.
Let's let Kevin finish, and then maybe there's other things that we might have caught.
I'm hoping that.
We want to make sure you finish too,
Yeah.
Misty. If there's
I
anything
I
else you
was
wanna
done.
add.
That was the updates that we did.
I didn't have any other changes. I think that when we were talking with Michelle this morning, that on the phone, that we had discussed trying to, like, this does come up in council orientation, I think. But I don't think it ever really comes up any other time, maybe, other than that. So having us look at this in our packet and everything, I was just like, oh, wow, I don't know if all of us are aware to the extent of what our responsibilities and our roles are in an emergency. So this is good stuff. I'm really glad that we're looking at it. So, and that was my only other comment, so.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, Alonzo, then Shelley.
Oh, yeah, I was just curious, and maybe because I have the old one, is the board members for the SL, CFR, there's no signatures? Are they not supposed to be on there?
You know, what page are you on?
Just on the, at the very beginning, the proclamation underneath the signatures of the mayor and council.
Correct. You know, that was not something that we discussed.
Well, that's because this is the City of Crestwell Emergency Operations Plan.
But there should still be, those should still be signed and part of this.
For who, the cottage, the SL,
Yes,
Chaplain
if
Fire
you-
Board?
Yes, it
Well,
says, this plan has been approved by the SLCFR Board of Directors. It will be revised and updated as needed. The fire chief is to be advised, et cetera, et cetera. I just assumed there should be some signatures on there.
Correct.
You are correct.
Same for the second page.
Yes.
And that's dated
Yeah.
the 2018.
Yes.
So maybe that's something to be revised and signed in the future.
Any other catches that you had, Alonzo?
No, I would just make the same comment. It is a very long document, and it is a huge responsibility for a handful of volunteers. It's a lot.
Shelley?
Yeah, so I also noted the city administrator, so the changing of that, but it sounds like you got that, so I won't worry about that. I also just noted that there is, in terms of emergency personnel, and I'm looking at page 8, if that is helpful.
Yes.
So they have the first line supervisors, mid-level management, and command and general staff city council, and there was an expectation of, looks like 3 different FEMA training courses that was noted there. I think that my understanding is we only need to take one, or the 100 level FEMA course, and so I didn't know if we needed to do those additional 2 FEMA courses, so the 200A and then the IS 700A. And so if we do, I want to make sure that we're doing that.
I believe that it's only required of staff,
Oh, okay, okay.
but
So
we
maybe
should probably ask Manager Amber to clarify just in case.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, I noted that city council was noted next to that, and so,
Okay.
What page is that again?
I'm on page 8.
On the top.
This is what I have on page 8.
Yeah, I don't know. Or it must be a different page 8.
Oh,
Yes,
This must be the updated.
I
right.
want to keep going until it's set. has situation and planning assumptions on the bottom of it.
In the packet that we got, it's on page 20, if that's helpful.
2.4,
Okay.
training requirements.
You got April,
So
not
maybe a
October.
note
Yeah.
for that, if that's really the case,
Yeah,
that
that's
council
when it
take
was
one
voted
and staff
by
take the other.
But yeah, it's.
Yeah,
gives
that,
us
that
the
might be
same
good,
as-
good to note that,
Yeah.
because,
Hang on a second, let's not have cross-talking. So Shelley
Well-
and Misty?
well, I was gonna say, if council only needs to take the 100 level FEMA course, because we talked about it last city council meeting, that in order for us to get any FEMA funding, if the situation presented itself, that we all need to have taken the course. And so I just wanna make sure that we have checked the boxes that we need to check, if we need to check it.
And then I had said just to, maybe we put a note in there, if that's the case, of council versus staff.
And then the other thing that I noted as I was going through that stood out to me was just because I noticed these things. So it's on page 9, or page 21 of the packet that was online, under 3.2 employees, essential employees and family safety. I just noted that the first sentence makes reference to his or her. And so I just always encourage the use of their as opposed to his or her.
And what page was that again? I'm sorry.
So it's on page 9. 21 in the packet, but it's under section 3.2. Employees,
Okay.
essential employees and family safety.
Perfect. Was that the only place that you noticed that?
That's the only place I noticed it, but
Okay.
you may want to just do a control F.
Sure. Perfect, thank you.
Okay, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, and then the one last thing that I was reflecting on is under 3.5, other agency plans, kind of the use of mutual aid agreements and memorandums of understanding. And so, one of the, when I went to the League of Oregon Cities Conference, one of the things they talked about was potentially being able to do an MOU or an MAA with a store, right? That may, if, you know, so like a Costco, they talked about Walmart as being one of those stores, but if we needed to supply city with food, things that were gonna expire, things like that, that there might be a potential there. And so that stood out to me as an opportunity.
Okay.
And I thought, hey, people like to eat. And that's it for me, I yield.
Okay, I have just a few. On the table of contents, Misty, it says right there, error bookmark not defined. I don't know what that meant. Probably
I
nothing.
think that's a mistake.
Okay,
Probably should have just been removed.
that was on the old one. So then, when it lists organizations in Crestwell, it lists under schools, this is table 8. And I can't tell you what page because it won't correspond to your page.
That's okay, yes.
But it lists the Crestwell Christian School at 380 Kings Road. I don't think they exist anymore, but there is the new Christian school that's now at the Baptist Church, New Hope Baptist.
Okay.
Since this time. So, and then under social services, it lists LCOG Senior and Disabled Services, which at one time it did have an office in Crestwell, but not anymore. So,
Correct.
do we list them here when they're not, because everything that's listed here are things that are here in Crestwell. So that's why I wonder whether that should be taken out.
Your first comment, Mayor, about
Yes.
the not found, that was corrected in the October issue. You just happened to got the April in your
I
packet.
got the old one. So, there's a lot of good information even in the old one.
Yeah.
Okay, so next steps, Misty.
Well, I think the next steps would be is I type up what we've discussed today and pass that on to Michelle for the next Public Safety Committee.
And then we want to get this back as soon as we can, in
Absolutely.
January for the new council, so
Absolutely.
they can all get appraised of it and read it. like we did in preparation for tonight. And then probably approve the update, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Appreciate the work you guys did on that.
Well, and thank you for everybody's suggestions and revisions. It's what makes it.
Well, thank you for your committee. You did lots and lots of work this year on that. Okay, so let's go on to Transportation and Public Works Committee. Kevin,
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, I was looking at the packet and I saw that I had something on there and I'm like, what? Because we haven't had a meeting, so we didn't actually have a report. But what I do have to share with you this evening, and this seemed like the most appropriate place for it, I think, during our discussions, was for agenda setting, that there had been a request somewhere along the line, the citizen concern regarding the need for a traffic signal on the other side of the bridge. So getting on the freeway there, it's dangerous, and I've seen a lot of near misses over there over time, and it kind of struck me that it's something that I do in my business, is to actually collect and CAD call information, so I'm actually able to pinpoint and look up how often accidents happen at that location. So I thought maybe I had something to offer to the discussion. So it was starting with that, but it essentially what could eventually be some kind of a charge for the committee in the future, depending, or some kind of a discussion or whatever, is seeing what we can do to possibly move the hands of ODOT a little bit faster on that one, if we could actually provide some data. I think that's been an issue in the past, is that it's been, they don't really have the data, they don't really have access to it. It just happens that this is something that I might be able to help with, so. It turns out, as I was just looking, I don't have the call data, but I can get it. That I want to go back at least a good 5 years, so that we aren't just providing the data from last year. I think it's good to see historically over a number of years, so I'm going to get that data. But one thing I can tell you is that a bigger concern probably is the actual on-ramp onto the freeway as you're going north. There's just not enough distance, and it's really the same problem for the other side of the freeway too. Is there's not a lot of with the trucks and everything coming down the speed they're coming and getting and merging onto the freeway. A lot of accidents go on there, and I get notified on my cell phone all the time when these things happen, because I programmed it to do that. So, was there anything else that we were talking about with that, Dave? Was that I'm trying to remember where we were headed with that particular topic. Other than that, do you see that as a future charge?
I do.
Yeah.
You said you had data you could get to us, and then give a charge to the public safety, transportation and public works.
So
to follow up and see what we can do to encourage ODOT to look at that and talk to us.
So I would recommend that be a charge coming up and is to the committee, maybe starting in January. Would that be appropriate when we're handing out all the new charges and stuff like that? And even though I won't be on council, I would be happy to contribute in this particular cause. So I'll at least attend whatever meetings and help in whatever way. And I think that the idea is to see if we can kind of get ODOT to do something. So
I seem to recall this conversation, we've had this conversation before, haven't we? And Sergeant Denham commenting that basically ODOT feels that there's not enough accidents there to justify that light. So maybe your data collection can show otherwise. It's been a while since that. I don't know when the last time ODOT looked at that.
yeah. Well, when we were talking with Michelle about it, she said that that was always one of the things that they would come back with, is that they didn't have enough data to show what was going on there. And so I think the call logs for that location and around there will help us. So
Great.
Okay,
that's it.
sounds good, thank you. Okay, Parks and Tree Advisory Board, Norma.
Hi. We finished our tree care plan. We revision, and it's in your packet. Eliminated the problem trees, so that they're not on our list anymore. Corrected all the grammar, all the problems, and finally got it ready for you guys to look at it. And I guess, I don't know when we'll accept it, as I think the city council is required to accept it, the revisions.
Yes. City council is required to adopt it. I
Okay,
think it's on the agenda for December.
okay. All right, I didn't think you could do it now, because there's not really
No.
much time to, it's an
We don't make
extensive.
those decisions at this
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah.
But we can give you all of our feedback.
Oh, yeah.
You ready to take all the notes? I don't know if there's gonna be a lot of notes, but do you have any additional comments, Norma, you wanna make about it?
I can't think of any right now, but if I come up with any while you're asking questions, okay.
Well, I just want to open up to counselors for comments or any input about it.
When you said the removal of the trees, were you talking about the ones with the?
Emerald elm,
The
ash borer.
dashboard?
Thank you,
And
yes.
is that mentioned in here?
It's not specifically mentioned, but the list of acceptable trees has eliminated the ashes. That's basically, I think, all we did. I don't know if we should necessarily
Yeah, I don't know.
add something about the emerald ash borer or not.
I don't,
It's something that we're gonna be facing in the years to come. I don't know.
I don't know either. I just saw that when it mentions of the removal of the historic fruit and nut orchards, if that needed to be in there, maybe it doesn't.
So on the Emerald Ash Borer, Michelle and I, you were involved in that meeting, and Riley Newman, who's the chair of your committee, we had a pretty extensive conversation about how to go forward, next steps, and there are definitely some next steps that are going to be put into action, but they're not included in this plan. That's going to be a whole separate project.
Gotcha.
That makes sense. Yeah, I haven't seen her since she was gonna talk to the tree committee about that. She hasn't been at the meetings lately for different reasons, or not the ones I've been to.
Council, other input, questions, corrections?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a great document. I really liked it. It was a delightful read. Again, this is just one of the things that my eyes notice, because it's very keen on it. So it's on page 104 of the packet, page 21 of of the plan, under damage. Talks about, so in that first bullet point, it says in the second sentence.
I see it.
Yep, for instance, if a neighbor trims the part of your tree that is over his property, I would encourage us to just change that language to their property.
Okay.
That was the one thing, I looked for it elsewhere.
Oh, yeah.
And I only saw it there. I have keen eyes to that.
Other comments, questions, counselor? Kevin?
So it was a pretty big read. I wound up kind of having to digest it in little chunks, and some stuff I'll come back to and give even more thought. But what was clear to me as I was reading the document is, first of all, it was really cool that we even have a tree plan like this. It's,
Right.
you know, and then obviously it's required if we want our designation as Tree City USA, but it's also neat to see that we took all the steps that it takes to get that designation, and that it's just part of our culture here in Cresswell. So I really appreciate, first of all, the folks that created that to begin with. These are revisions that I think, and I also express thanks to the committee for going through and just looking at those things as well. But the other thing that I kind of wanted to ask about, but I don't know if there's anybody here that can speak to it as well, is that those pictures of the orchards was really telling. And it was like the shrinking number of orchards in
Oh, yeah,
Crestwell
that-
and stuff like that. And so it got me thinking along the lines of, well, I don't know exactly what kind of control we have over that. If landowners want to sell their land to developers, they can do that. But as we have conversations about growth, extending our boundaries and things like that, then it got me thinking about why some cities choose to encourage upward growth instead of outward growth. And I know the Crestwell has recently adopted some changes in their development codes and things like that that allow for more of that kind of stuff. And so I'm interested in trying to have conversations and discussions about how we encourage that kind of development in Crestwell to the extent that we're able to as a council and stuff. But I really, that got me thinking a lot. Trees made me think of housing.
I don't know how we can encourage people to plant more trees.
Well, I had an observation, Kevin, that ties into that. When I looked at the first map, 1936, and I went on, I think that much of the green we see is outside the city limits of Crestwell.
Oh,
In fact, the only portion that I think is actually, not the only portion, but if you go up to the map of 1964, there's a big chunk that is in the city of Crestwell, just kind of north first, second area up there, that's been turned into housing. But then if you look at 1990, the chunks there, I'm quite certain are outside the city limits of Crestwell. But on the encouraging note, there's a lot of land out by the dairy on Dale Cooney that's been turned into Filberts the last number of years. I was driving out yesterday out Sears Road, and there's a Christmas tree farm out there that is being turned into Filberts, as well as Christmas trees. So there's still a lot of land that's being developed for those kinds of purposes, but it's outside of the city limits proper. And like I say, my hunch is that some of what's showing up here as the green, it's outside of the city limits. So in terms of us as a city council saying, how can we turn city-owned land into more orchards? We have a hard time finding city land to turn into parks.
right.
So,
That's true.
Maybe more trees in our parks. I don't know if
Well.
that's possible.
So, the observation I had, Norma, was that there's a lot of recommendations in here for needed actions. Page 5 and 6 in the executive summary has quite a number of recommendations, things that we need to do. I noticed on page 7, more recommendations, which led me to think that the tree board next year and the city council has some implementation work to do. Then I had on page 42, which is the page that has the ordinance. I noticed it begins with section 7. So I wonder what happened to sections 1 to 6. But this is also an appendix, so it was probably intentional that sections 1 through 6 of ordinance 468 were not included, and only the last few sections that had to do with the planting and protection of trees, and not the creation of the tree board. But maybe
Yeah, I
you
don't
can,
know.
maybe you can pass that on to your committee, and I'm sure there was a reason why the first 6 sections were left out, and probably quite intentional. But I want to echo Kevin's words. I thought this document was extremely well written and put together. Very thorough. I was quite impressed with it.
I'd like to take credit for most of it, but we can't. We can't, we just made sure that it was grammatically right and it had what we needed. I spoke to somebody from the Forestry Service, and they said they could give us some further ideas for celebrating Arbor Day, and it might be worth checking into what new ideas.
Good.
One of the problems is during the pandemic is we could not have an Arbor Day celebration at all. And so maybe we could have some alternative activities that don't include large groups of people getting together as an alternative to that should a pandemic come back or when the pandemics come back.
Okay, well,
So
we
we're
will.
still fit into the
Sure.
Tree City. We still do the activities that are needed.
Okay. Misty?
So there was two things I noted. The first one was on page 19, in the very first paragraph about front yard trees. And the monetary value of trees on your property. It was definitely higher than I had expected. So that was interesting.
I'm not sure, I don't know that that's still accurate, the amount of money. Would you have any way of knowing if these,
Almost
the
9,000?
values?
No, I don't know. I don't know where
The
those.
inflation, it's gotta go up.
Go up?
right?
Yeah, they might actually be higher than that.
Yeah.
That was my thought.
So I thought that was some interesting information. The other was the list of trees
Contact that.
on Appendix A, page 34 and 35. Boy, most of those trees, I do not know what they are. So that's an interesting group of street tree list.
I don't know where they,
How they came about
yeah, I
that.
don't know why. I've noticed that the container size is small in a lot of these, 4 to 8 foot. So I think they might have been planning on putting these trees in planters instead of in the ground. But some of these trees are 15 to 40 feet tall, which might be higher than we want within our city limits streets. We
Well, this
didn't
is just
change
the-
any of those except for dropping the ash trees.
I just thought it was an interesting group.
Yeah, the only thing we changed is dropping the ash, and I don't,
That was all.
Any other counselor comments? So, Grace, can you tell us, is this on the agenda for the December 12 council meeting?
Don't have an agenda summary yet.
Okay, well, Michelle and Kevin and I worked on it, but I don't have it for me either. So I think this will be on the agenda for December 12th. But I don't know for sure right offhand.
Okay.
But I think so. So if there's anything in here that needs to be changed, did you take the notes of these and Grace has the note too? So we need to get those communicated to Manager Amberg quickly.
okay.
Okay, so Norma, you might want to confer with Grace and make sure that you both have captured, there were only a few items, but we need to make sure those are captured. If not, and it is on the agenda, then council come and be prepared to amend this prior to making a vote on it. Amend any grammatical things.
The next meeting of Park and Trees is on the 6th of December, and the next city council meeting, I believe, is on the 12th.
Yeah, this has to go to Grace by this Wednesday, I believe. So, can you, Norma, if you and Grace can confer, maybe tomorrow, just to make sure that you both have captured what we talked about, and that goes to Manager Amber.
Okay.
They're pretty slight revisions. Okay. Now we go to the Airport Commission.
No report tonight, Mayor.
Okay, LCOG. LCOG, that's me. So, the next meeting of LCOG is scheduled for December 22nd, and so I don't have a report. So now we go to Lane Act. Shelley?
Y'all, I have a heck of a report today. I'm
Okay.
very, very excited. And I think you know most of the reasons why I'm very excited. Number one, it's Lane Act. I mean, always get excited about it. But two things that we learned. One thing that I learned in a meeting outside, it just was shared with me. But the most important thing that we learned is that there's a Great Streets funding program. So it's a grant program that essentially we don't do anything for because ODOT acts on our behalf. So everything has already been submitted. We are part of Region 2. And so there was a $50 million allocation for the Great Streets program for the state of Oregon. And so $15 million of that has already been spoken for another project. So really, there's $35 million, which is no small sum of money. But each of the regions get together, like within their region, and they say, okay, so what are the programs that we want to put forward, because it's going to be a competitive program. So what do we want to advance? And so from Region 2, there were 2 programs that were advanced, so kind of finalist sort of things. One was a Great Streets program out in the city of Oak Ridge. It's about a $9 million request. And then the second one was the city of Cresswell. And that's, about a $7 million request. So again, just $7 million, no big deal.
Pocket change.
Yeah, we can find that. But if we are awarded that, if that moves forward, the thinking is that construction would happen in 2026. So we've got a bit of time. Again, it's a very competitive process. We have some great champions for us with ODOT. So it'd be 2026 if we are awarded. It would involve some additional work with the jog, so some repaving. There would be some additional street lights that would go in. I believe there's some additional work with kind of connecting the jog kind of through. Again, I have to look at like all the schematics, but connecting that more directly rather than having the jog. And so there could be a number of fantastic things. Again, potential street realignment right around the jog, that's a confusing area. But again, I'm very excited, even to just be moved forward as a finalist, because there were some really competitive and really exciting potential programs that ODOT could have said, yes, we want to put our energy behind here. And so there's nothing we can do, right? It's out, it's submitted. We just wait to see what happens. But I have shared that there's a lot of energy around improvement of our streets. And in particular, that area within our community. And so anything that we can do to help supplement that, to help support that, to help champion that, to be selected. They said, thank you, noted. Because I don't know if you can imagine this. I've got some energy around moving this project forward. So that is exciting piece of news number 1. I think I'll have more information probably February or March around that. So there's that. And then exciting piece of information number 2 is that we got to meet with the new LTD manager director. His name is Jameson, and he's just a really delightful fellow. I have invited him certainly to come and see Cresswell, to ride the bus and give us some thoughts. Had a good conversation with him around the meaning of rural and what does that mean as we think about the impact of the day-to-day person who's riding, and how that we may not have the same kind of quantitative information, but we've got qualitative information about what good transportation means and public transportation means for our community. In that same meeting where we got to meet him, it was down at South Lane Wheels, which is in Cottage Grove. The director of South Lane Wheels shared that in the upcoming biennium, there is a STIF proposal, and so STIF stands for the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, so STIF. That they're looking at trying to get additional funding to provide additional transportation routes, specifically on Highway 99, that would connect Cresswell to Cottage Grove. And so South Lane Wheels does a lot around providing transportation to hospitals and healthcare, and so that could be a really exciting and important development potentially for our senior community here in Cresswell. So again, two very exciting things that I learned about. So in the Lane Act meeting, when they said, hey, do we have volunteers to be on the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund Committee, I said, heck yes, I will absolutely do that. So I got myself on that committee to help try and move that forward and try and bring revenue and opportunities for our community. So those are two exciting updates about Lane Act. And so again, we meet on the second Wednesday of every month. And so if you are interested, I forgot to send the link to.
Second Wednesday.
Second
So that would be
Wednesday.
the 14th?
Yes.
What time?
It is from 5:30 to 7:30, and we meet online.
Okay, what's it?
I will send you the Zoom link.
Okay.
I totally forgot to send it to you in November. I apologize about that. But if anyone else is excited about attending Lane Act, you just let me know, because I will happily share that link with you.
Would you like to share it with all of us?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So as soon as I get it, I will share it. And if you would like to attend, you are 100% invited to do so.
And thank you for volunteering to be on the committee.
Yeah, yeah. I honestly, I think that decisions are made and influenced by the people who show up, and so I want to make sure to be the best champion I can for Cresswell, and so I will sign up to be part of committees.
Awesome.
Good. That's it for Lane Act.
Okay. So we move on to item 3, presentations. We have none tonight. Item 4, staff report on airport concerns. So, Shelley, if you can bring your chair up, and Jim's going to come over. So here's how we're going to proceed with this item tonight. First, we're going to hear a report from Jim Piper, who is our financial director for the city of Cresswell, and Shelley Humble, who is our airport manager, will hear a report. Then council, it will be our turn to ask questions, gather information. Then we will open it up to members of the audience. So I'd like to see a show of hands. How many members of the audience would like to speak tonight on this matter? 3, 4, 5. Bjorn, you're not going to speak tonight?
I don't have anything to say at this point.
Okay, so we have 5. So when we get to that part, I'm going to limit you to 5 minutes apiece, speaking time. Because 5 times 5 is 25, if I still know my math. So, and then when we've heard from the members of the audience, then council members, then we'll have an opportunity to discuss amongst ourselves what kind of further direction we want to give to Manager Amberg to follow up on. Okay? So this is the first time we're going to address this as a group. I suspect it won't be the last. So our purpose tonight is to get information we can from our staff, to hear from members of our audience, to figure out any additional direction we want to give at this point to Manager Amberg to follow up on. That make sense? Okay. So, Jim and Shelley, it's your turn.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, city councilors, for allowing us to come speak. It was brought to our attention through numerous emails and then from Bjorn Dellen, and then he came to the last city council meeting on November 14th, and the council asked that we prepare a report and bring that back to this meeting. I reviewed the lease files. It's important to note that I reviewed them on November 18th. So Mr. Dolan, he pulled those files prior to that time, and I noted in the memo that that's when I went through the files. I noted that insurance certificates were present. They were right on top of the file when you opened it up, so it looked like maybe we had received those recently. In reviewing the lease policies and procedures and understanding the leases, you have to understand basically the timeline of the airport. Many of those leases were written prior to the city taking over the airport leases in 2000. A lot of those leases were for 40 years in total term. They're 20 years plus a 10-year plus a 10-year, so you get 2 renewals. The reason for that, and this comes from, this makes sense to me as an accountant, that a building is a 40-year asset, and you want to be able to recover that asset. That being said, back up to where the leases are structured. The leases are structured in where the tenant makes the improvement on their dime, they pay for the improvements. They essentially turn it over to the city, therefore not paying property taxes on that improvement. Otherwise, they would be paying Lane County property taxes on, say, $400,000 investment. While the city has the asset, the leaseholder has the right to use that asset for the life of the building. Essentially 30 to 40 years is the useful life of that building. So you need to understand how these are structured. The city does charge a land lease because the tenant isn't allowed to own the actual land per FAA regulations. They're not allowed to own the land at the airfield. So they do pay a land lease. Most of those land leases, if not all of them, are structured with a CPI year-over-year increase.
Just to clarify, there's 3 different types of, well, 2 technically types of agreements. One is the land lease. That is for the people that built their hangars. Those are the leases that are adjusted annually per ordinance according to the CPI. The other rental agreements are not tied to any type of increase.
Correct. Those are the buildings that we own. So in my memo, I say it's important to understand the differences between these. The buildings that we own, we're actually leasing the use of the building over a term of time. All the contracts have a term. The new contracts that we have for the hangars that we purchased in the last 4 years, we did a 1-year lease on those, and they can be continued on a month-to-month basis. There was a provision in there to raise those rents 150% after the initial term. That is the city staff, thought that was egregious. We couldn't enforce that increase. It's there, though, to incentivize a renewal. So if you're a tenant and you're looking at a year lease is ending, and if I'm going to continue to stay here, I probably want to get a new lease. And that's something we probably should have looked into. Keep in mind, we did just come out of the pandemic, and we had quite a bit of turnover, including retirements of the utility billing clerk who was handling these leases in the billing system. During the review, there were those 5 hangars I spoke about. And again, in section 21.5, the increase of 150% after the 20-year term wasn't something we felt like we could enforce. We did want to keep the tenant in the hangar, so we continued to rent on a month-to-month basis. I think in future rental agreements, the city-owned hangar should no longer have that 150% provision. It doesn't really make sense. And rather, we'll have some sort of language tying that to a CPI index.
On that note, in order to comply with our grant assurances, when we increase any rental, when we look at all the rental agreements, we must increase all of them equally. So we will have to look at a procedure to look at that. And that is not something.
Right.
We had 9/11 took out the airport, took out a lot of income for aviation, general aviation plummeted. Then 2007, 2008, again, with the downturn of the economy, we lost a lot of people flying, businesses. And so aviation is just now, the last year, year and a half, has seen a positive turn to where it hasn't been.
Right, so we did look at Viper Aviation as a fixed base operator. It was also inherited from Creswell Airport Inc., a for-profit entity. The lease was signed in 1997, 3 years prior to the city owning it. The terms of the lease stated that they'd be there on a temporary basis at such times a fixed base operator can be installed. The term temporary was not defined in the lease agreement. The term fixed base operator is not defined in the lease agreement either. Previous conversations with staff confirmed the city's definition of temporary basis in this context to be 25 years. Further, the city has no intent of bringing in another fixed base operator. In my memo, I should clarify, we don't want to bring in another primary fixed base operator. In section 13.001, the primary operator is the city. And that's because we sell fuel to the airport, and that's a primary revenue generator for the city. So I didn't see any sort of trigger under this lease agreement that would say that the temporary term was over.
And just to back that up, according to our rules and regulations, all the businesses, we have 10 of them on the field, and each and every one of them is classified, meets the requirements as a fixed base operator. They provide a type of aviation business to the airport users. So all of them meet that criteria.
So again, I looked at the lease further, and there didn't seem to be a provision for raising the rent year over year. And then after looking at other business agreements, there doesn't appear to be a provision in any of the business leases to raise it year over year. And there were some concerns, economic concerns at the airport, as Shelley touched on. One of them, Lake Community College used to be on the field, and they left. And there was some concerns about that. Also, the airport was dated, it was aging. And there's been many improvements that have been done since, and will continue to be done. We got a new roof thanks to the snowstorm of 2019. We are getting a new HVAC system and new flooring, so the FBO and the offices attached will be in much better shape than they have been for decades. And we're also getting the the wastewater, and that will be a huge improvement for the airport.
Wastewater treatment center. So then we can allow people to connect, and then we're close to our 20 years, which is mandatory for our fire suppression with the FAA. Once we hit that 20-year mark, then we built, the fire suppression system was built big enough so that we can do a loop system and be able to utilize those pipes to bring water to the hangars. So then they'll be able to have sewer and water, which has been one of the biggest lacking items on the airport. No more porta potties.
Right. I did go out and review the Secretary of State's Business Registry website. Viper was continued to be registered. They're under a DBA, assumed business name, or doing business as Viper Aviation. It is owned by the Humboldts. And there's also a copy of the insurance. Like I said, it was right on top of the files here at City Hall. I checked all the other businesses that are at the airport. There was 2 businesses that weren't on the registry that after doing some investigation, they are actual sole proprietors. They aren't actually filed under an LLC or and so we've got, but we did have an instance of a business that is currently that's not currently registered with the state, and that was Redwood Refractory. We've talked about that, and we would like them to get back with the state of Oregon and get registered on the business registry website.
And I can speak to that. When he did contact the state, the name has been taken, so he has registered another, it's Bushman Bill, and he has transferred his insurance so that it is covered, and he is working with his attorney to get that taken care of. But he is registered with the state.
Good.
So
Okay.
he was always Kyle Bushman doing business as Radwood Refractory. Now he's doing business as also Bushman Build. So he is current.
Right, and that's a pretty quick turnaround. I've done business registries for nonprofits, and it's almost instantaneous. You go on the website and fill out the information. So we were okay with waiting for him to get that done and to verify that it had been done through the State of Oregon website. Based on the concerns that Mr. Dillon brought forward, it does appear that we need to do some follow-up on renewing contracts. It's always good to have some input. We get input from our auditors as well to do some housekeeping. And so we have one person who, as part of their job function, also, they bill all the water utilities in town. They're also billing the airport, and there's 75 leases at the airport, approximately 75 leases at the airport. And this person is brand new. Our previous utility billing clerk retired on December 31st of last year. And we need to make a system that would operate this, that would automate this operation. We are working with our auditors on a lease agreement right now. They are reviewing all our leases because GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, issued GASB Statement Number 78, and they are requiring us to calculate the net present value of all future payments of all of our leases. And I'm really interested to see what that amount's gonna be. Net present value of future lease payments. So they had to look at all the contracts and see how long the terms are with possible extensions and add up all those payments and then factor in inflation and then bring it back to current value of the dollar, today's dollar. So they are going through the files as well, and I want to make sure that they're tidy going forward. We had a big four firm come forward during this GASB statement when it came out. They came to us, and as they did many municipalities and tried to pitch their product, they had a software that could do this as a database software, and it would keep track of renewals, it would keep track of insurance, it would keep track of the terms and the future payments. And it was around, I want to say it was around $20,000 for this piece of software. And then they had an annual renewal license. We opted to use our auditors, and they're going to build an Excel spreadsheet. I think that spreadsheet can be utilized for the exact process we're talking about, where once a month, the clerk can go through and look and see, okay, who is due for a contract this month, who's due it for insurance. But I really appreciate Mr. Dillon's comments, because we could use those, use this as a time to kind of tighten up and make sure our files are neat and ready. As to the concerns about the businesses at the Creswell Airport not meeting the minimum requirements for commercial aeronautic activities, that's not something I am well versed in. That's more of a airport commission, airport committee.
And I did review all of the businesses with minimum standards. And I do not see I'm not sure where he was meaning. It wasn't specific. It was generic, so I'm not sure where he's saying that they're not meeting the minimum standards, unless it has to do with his comments about loss of revenue, not paying the fair market value. And I do have a lease, I included the lease rate study on the same spreadsheet that I did for the TOFA, which is the taxiway object-free area, and the TLOFA, taxi lane object-free area, and the penalties and fines, as you had asked that I review. And we're not the lowest. We're right about medium. We're not the highest for square footage. So this shows that we're well within our market range. And I can pass these out now if you'd like, or I can pass them out.
Let's wait for the end of your report.
Okay, thank you, Shelley. As to Mr. Dolan's estimate of loss of revenue in excess of $100,000, it appears that the assumption is the hangar rents could be raised without causing other damages to the airport or having economic impacts on the city of Creswell itself, meaning loss of businesses in our business community. Economic impacts, other damages. The rate increases referred to in the lease contracts, we spoke about that. They weren't something we felt comfortable doing 150% of the lease as an increase just didn't seem right. This could cause litigation and conflicts with grant assurances, and we actually had I've got a email from Peter Doyle at the FAA speaking to this. Actually, I'll pass it around. He spoke to a case, actual legal case, where a tenant was kicked out of the airport, somebody else was allowed to rent the space, and the tenant that was actually evicted sued and was awarded damages, and that was in Mr. Doyle's email. He says, I don't know all the details, but it could also be an issue, economic discrimination, in the event that the current leasee, in other words, the person that was evicted, of the desired hangar is improperly terminated and provided to the complaining tenant. So if somebody complains they want to be moved in. He cited Thermco Aviation Incorporated, an A26 company versus the City of Los Angeles Board of Airport Commissioners, and Los Angeles World Airports. And he further goes on to talk about grant assurances 22 and economic non-discrimination. Obligates the airport sponsor to provide airport access. It does not obligate the airport sponsor to provide specific hangars or hangar types. So we're to grant equal access, but we don't have to kick somebody out in order to put somebody in. We can try to offer them a location at the airport. And again, Mr. Dolan asserted that he's being treated unfairly at the airport. In negotiations with the city, in an email dated September 29th between Mr. Dolan and Manager Humble, Mr. Dolan rejected the proposed lease agreement, and he asked to be indemnified in the lease agreement per his insurance agent, and the city does not indemnify any business at the Creswell Airport. Airport Manager Humble waited 2 months after the last communication with Mr. Dolan in this regard, and after 2 months, she leased it to Mr. Stevenson.
So I waited 2 months, no response. Mr. Stevenson signed the rental agreement on December of 2021, so he's been in it almost a year. And I did reach out to Mr. Doyle. He is the Regional Compliance Program Manager for the FAA Northwest Mountain Region. So he is the person that I would go to when I have questions regarding administration. And I had gave him a brief overview of what was happening, and that was his during our conversation, and then he sent it in an email. So it was a formal complaint, a Part 16, and that was the decision.
Yeah, the decision in regards to Third Coast Aviation Inc. and the
So
city
we
of
would
Los
be in
Angeles.
violation of Grant Assurance 22, should we evict a tenant that's currently in good standing at the airport to place another tenant that wants to be there.
I did provide the minimum standards for commercial activities. It's straight from the airport rules and regulations. It's part of the packet material as well. It covers commercial activities at the airport pretty thoroughly. What I did notice is that there is a lot of wiggle room. There is
A lot of what?
discretion. Wiggle room?
Oh, okay.
Catchphrase, right? There is a lot of discretion to rent on a case-by-case basis. And that ends my staff report. Does the council have any questions?
Well, Shelley, did you want to pass this out and Jim pass out your document, and then Shelley have anything further to add to the report before we open it up for council questions?
I believe, as I said, I looked at the minimum standards. All businesses on the airfield do comply with the minimum standards. Again, I'm not sure what he was referring to. It was just a generic statement. It wasn't specialized, specific. Most of the businesses that have been there for several years. We have some long-standing tenants that have been there as long as I've been airport manager and longer. We do have 2 flight schools. We have 4 maintenance shops. We have a bi-wing business that gives bi-wing rides. We have Rose Air Taxi. We have statewide contracting, which is both Rose Air Taxi and statewide contracting are both Part 135. So they've been approved by the FAA. Statewide contracting brings a lot of business to the airport. They do fire watch during the summer for the Forest Service, and they're certified with them. They also do tracking of different types of animals for Fish and Wildlife. And then, like I said, we have the 4 maintenance shops. We'd like to have more businesses as always. And I'll entertain any questions that you may have.
Okay, so do we have extra copies? Grace, do you have copies of these?
I do have copies.
You do? You have copies for Manager Amber too?
I can make her one, yes.
Oh, well, you can make those later. I just wanted to check and make sure. So this one here has to do with penalties and violations, so that's later, a later report tonight,
The
right?
only part that I think is pertinent to this conversation is the lease rate study, and that
Okay.
goes to the fair market value. And these are the airports that are pretty comparable to Crestwell. And the lease study rate came directly from Oregon Department of Aviation. They did a lease rate study last year. North Bend, I don't know where it is. It was on there. But as you can see, we are 28 cents per square foot for ground lease. And, they go, unfortunately, the Oregon Department of Aviation is really always very, very low. They're at 10 cents per square foot. And then it gives you the prices for the hangars and the box hangars. And it just all depends on the size of the buildings that they have. But do not see where we are way under, or I believe we're right about in the middle. I think our highest rent paid is statewide contracted, and they're paying $749.85 a month for ground lease, or for, sorry, box hanger rent. And then our T hangers may look, the $90 may look small, but as I lovingly refer to that row of T hangers as Baltic Avenue. So there are no shared walls. It's just, it's one of the oldest ones we have. It's slated to be torn down once we can get some new hangars built. But at this point, the people that are in there, they know that it's not in the best shape, but at least it keeps the rain and the wind off their airplanes. Not birds, because birds find a way in, but at least it protects their airplanes somewhat.
Okay. So, counselors, questions about what you've heard about the document? Tammy?
I have a quick question. You commented that we do not have a definition for temporary lease, and we do not have a definition for fixed base operator. On page 2 of your memo, where you were talking about Viper, you mentioned in your memo that their lease has been with the city since the city took over in July of 2000. And that the city believes that to be a 25-year, the definition of a 25-year, a temporary lease is 25 years. But there's nothing in rules, regulations, any city documents. So where did you get the 25 years? How did you come to that statement?
My understanding is it's not in the contract that was signed in 97. Where we came up with 25 years is just the expected life of the business. We would expect it to be in existence at least that long.
Is that a normal for aviation businesses or just businesses in, I just want to clarify, who's we? And why have we not had a definition for temporary? And in our new rules and regulations that are coming out, are we going to have a definition?
Well, just to preface this, there is a definition of fixed base operator. When Viper Aviation signed with Creswell Airport, Inc., which is a private company, they were looking for a company that would oversee the whole airport. So they were looking for what they classified as a full service FBO. In other words, they would do the fuel, they would do the leases, they would do the maintenance, they would do everything. So but when Viper came to Creswell, they only wanted to do maintenance. They didn't want to take over and do all that. So the temporary agreement was signed on the premise that if at some time when Creswell Airport Inc. still had it, that a full-fledged company that wanted to run the fuel and everything else that went along with running the airport, then Viper Aviation would vacate the premise. That never happened. In 2000, the city took over, and when the city took over, they did not want to allocate any money to renewing the leases or reviewing or updating. They wanted, and they were allowed, they checked with legal, it was okay to just keep the leases as they were. That's why the temporary was never corrected. According, and Ross is here, and he can confirm that. What happens, even though it says a temporary could be infinite number of years. It doesn't necessarily have to be 25 years. That was just a number, that's how many years they have been here. But a temporary just reverts to month,
they've been here 25 years, and this, it says, the city's definition of temporary basis in this context is 25 years.
Right, that was a,
Coincidence?
that was a discussion Manager Amber and I had, and then that was responding to
So
Mr.
that's a
Dolan's.
staff's opinion.
Yeah.
That a
yeah.
temporary basis is 25 years. It's not actually anything that's in our rules and regs that defines. And I'm completely shocked that we would take over from Crestwell Airport Inc. and not review leases. I'm completely shocked. I cannot see Manager Amberg or Ross being okay with, we're just gonna buy the
It was
airport
Ron
now.
Hansen,
Okay,
and he
so,
retired in June. The city took over in February,
and Ron worked for,
and Ron Hansen was the city administrator.
okay,
And
And so-
he instructed me, as I was hired, not to incur any expenses. They wanted to leave the leases as they were, and that just to keep it running. And
so
that's exactly
maybe
what I
Ron
have done.
reviewed the leases at the least? We don't know.
I don't
Hope
know.
Okay. On page 4 of your memo, where you talk about the minimum requirements at the very top of commercial. As to Mr. Dalen's concerns of businesses at the Crestwell Airport not meeting the minimum requirements for commercial aeronautical activities, the Crestwell Airport Rules and Regulations draft. You quote the draft. We haven't voted on that yet.
Right,
Correct.
right.
Okay, so it's this counselor's opinion that we should respond to our concerned citizen with current rules and regulations, not a draft that I and my other counselors have voted on. We're saying, per the draft, it does meet commercial aeronautical activities, and I take issue with that. I believe we should respond to our citizen with current rules and reg. Also, what you have attached as minimum standards for commercial activities, is that the draft or is that current? What
The
am I
only
looking at?
changes in the draft were removing on page 27 of 35, the city manager or his designee. We took out his.
I see that in yellow.
And then the only other addition was on page 29. The new advisory circular is for C, not for B. Those
So-
were the only changes.
So the draft does not change our definition of commercial
Correct.
Correct.
aeronautical activities.
Correct.
Okay. Will our new regulations and rules define the word temporary?
I would leave that to
Temporary lease.
Ross as to whether or not we need a definition.
It's actually been through, there's Ross, okay. It's actually been through Ross already and come to council. And then it went, we haven't voted on it yet, but are you saying that you're still working on the draft?
I would
To add
direct
that?
that question to Ross to see whether or not he feels we need to add a definition of temporary lease.
Ross, would you
Do
like to
that
speak
now,
to
Mayor?
that? Yeah, we invited our city attorney, Ross, why don't you come up here and we'll pull up a chair.
Okay.
We've
I
got,
have two other questions, but I'm happy that we can address this
let's
now.
grab these chairs right here. Here we go, thank you. I'll put this over here. Got a big stuff, I don't want to trip on it. Okay, so we have a question for, this is Mr. Ross Williamson of our city attorney fee, for city attorney firm. Question, temporary, is that included in the definitions page or in the document at all?
So, good question, and my preference would be to not need to define temporary, because I think we need, so maybe I can step back a little bit. Obviously, I appreciate the citizen comment, and I think it's brought forward a bunch of issues that we need to correct. I mean, so it's identified some problems, and we need to correct them. And so that would be my recommendation, is to correct these problems. And so that we don't have to rely on old leases with undefined terms, and so that we can update those leases and use terms that are either defined in the lease itself or in refer to our new rules, and so that a lease isn't temporary, it's a lease.
Yes, sir.
So I would prefer we just do away with the word temporary altogether.
Thank you, great answer. Okay, on page 3 of your memo, you mention engine research and development. And it was pointed out to us that they were not a aeronautical business. And if one of you can just help me, they build gasoline engines for cars?
No,
or
they are
airplanes?
aeronautical. I'm not sure
They
where
are.
you get that they're not. They are.
Okay.
They
I
do
think that
valves,
was
they
in our
do.
last work session, was a comment from someone.
I think that was a comment, but not from the company nor from staff.
Okay, so they do.
So they are an aeronautical business,
Okay.
and they do engine rebuild. They sell engine, well, we have gas engines, that's what we
Yeah.
have. Grind valves, sell aviation parts. In fact, he's here.
Oh, okay, cool.
So that's just a misunderstanding. He
Okay.
is an
I wanted to
aviation
clear that up.
business.
Okay. And then my last question, and then I'll leave you
Nope,
alone.
you're fine.
I don't know anything about airports, so. When Ragwood Refactory LLC could not re-register with the state under that name and opened the Bushman Build, are we going to have an addendum written to our lease that the business name has changed?
We will, and he is working with an attorney to investigate. So, and I'm not sure where that's at,
To investigate?
where the name is. Because it's a very unique name,
Okay.
and it's
Oh,
been.
to who has that name?
Yes.
Is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, well.
So
it's-
it's an ongoing investigation,
Okay,
but to get within standards of our airport rules and regulations, he registered with the state
yeah, that's
under
awesome.
Bushman Build,
Yeah.
which, and people do that all the time. They, Take Wing, which is one of our flight schools, was Take Wing for a lot. And then she changed her auspice, and now she's Flying D.
Okay.
So it's not unusual. And they are both referenced, and when we do update the lease, it will be Kyle Bushman doing business as. And it could possibly at that time be both Ragwood Refactory and Bushman Build.
I just don't think we should wait till
no.
update the lease. I think if they're operating as Bushman Build now with the state, that we need to protect the city's interest and have an addendum to the lease now. Who are we leasing this to?
And they
It
do
can't
have
be
the
a non-existent business, as our concerned citizen pointed out to us. And I sell real property, Shelley, so I don't do leaseholds, I don't know this, but if someone changes their name, there's a divorce, we stop, everything stops. We have to go through escrow, we have to go through title, we have to do another preliminary, and we have to check that that's a legal name. So it would seem to me that in a lease, we would also need an addendum.
And he has listed it on the insurance indemnifying the city for both names, so. But
Those
it is
were
one
my
of the leases that we do
questions.
have to rewrite.
Is the Viber Aviation lease going to be rewritten to no longer say temporary?
That would be my recommendation. Yeah, absolutely.
Because we're saying 25 years, that lease has been with the city since 2000. In 2025 is 25 years, so either the lease is adjusted or a permanent FBO is installed, right? That's my
Well, it
understanding
is a
of the
permanent
lease.
FBO. It just,
Then why does the lease say until a permanent is sign.
Because they, at that time, Crestwell Airport Inc. wanted a full-service FBO, which in aviation terms would be someone that ran the airport, someone that did the
Then we need a new
fuel.
lease. We need a
Correct,
change to our
because
lease.
it's not accurate for us
It
now.
is absolutely not accurate. It should say, not into, it should, that language needs to come out. It's just,
Correct, he qualifies as,
I took 2 years of contract law, so Ross has got to back me on this because
I
I'm
know
just
who I'm gonna
going
ask
with,
if I have
you know,
questions.
what I remember. And that just doesn't make sense to me that we would have terms in a lease that are no longer valid.
all of those leases, the majority of them that were created by Crestwell Airport Inc. have not been updated.
In
Correct.
2022, we have
At one
no
point, I
process to review.
believe, it was probably the early 2000s, and I think it was when Mayor Petiti was here. They wanted to update all the leases, but they would have had to do, what's it called? Appraisals.
Appraisals, yeah.
And that, at that time, it was like $15,000.
What's the cost of doing business?
That was not a decision from us, that was a decision from the council not to follow through.
I was in Portland then, sorry.
Okay, other councilors, who
Councilor
wants
Shuck
to,
is.
who wants to go
Shut
next?
up.
Sure. Well, I too had the same, basically the same question as to how the 25 years came up. Because it was a conversation, that doesn't make it so. But you've clarified all that, and I guess moving forward, that's going to be fixed. So next question was, and I think it was answered. I just would like maybe a little more clarification on the on exactly how there's a conflict with the, in many cases, the rate increases referred to in the lease contract are supposed market rates could cause litigation in conflict with grant assurances. How, can you clarify that again? Sorry.
Sure, the handout that I gave you.
That was for that one example.
Right.
That means just any, that could create the same conflict for those grant assurances, or they're just different scenarios, different?
There's different scenarios. We could raise business rents one at a time and maybe cause grant assurances to be in conflict. We need to do them all at once.
Grant assurances state that you will not treat anybody differently. So all of the land leases are treated exactly the same. They get the exact same CPI index increase every year according to the lease agreements. All the lease agreements are the same. It's the same thing with all the rentals. If we are going to increase a rental fee, it has to be across the board for each of those rentals. So that way we're not discriminating.
Sure. So and I'm so a little confused, so you have the rentals, and then you have the leases. So when you make an increase, whether it's a lease or a rental, it's all the same across the board for everybody.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Except, I want to make sure I'm correct in this. The land lease, the person privately builds a hangar, and then they lease the land from the city. Those are adjusted annually per ordinance. That's what you said.
Per
And
the
I
lease.
remember every year in July, we have to approve all the T hangers, tie downs, all that kind of stuff. We have to approve what the increase is going to be for the coming year. That's part of our budgeting process. But that doesn't apply to the city-owned that are leased. So that's the differentiation between the two.
City-owned
correct?
rentals.
City-owned rentals.
Right.
So if someone builds their own hangar, leases the land from the city, then every year we set whatever the increase is going to be, and it's across the board the same.
Correct.
But if the city owns the land and the hangar, and someone is renting it, then those are the leases we haven't adjusted for 25 years.
Right, which is what Jim and I have talked, and Michelle have talked about. We need to set a policy for review, probably at the beginning of budget season, to look to make sure that we're still within the fair market value of like airports.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify what you were asking.
Sure.
Make sure I was on the same page. Go ahead.
Okay, well, and thank you for that. And our last question, which is some of the, I think it's a pretty strong statement from Mr. Dolan that there is a conflict of interest between you out there with that business. And no better perfect person to ask is our city attorney. Is there a conflict of interest?
Outright, no. And I've advised Michelle and Shelley on this issue, so they have my guidance, and I believe they're operating under it. So just the fact that she is airport manager in itself is not a conflict.
And that's what I was thinking. Thank you, Ross, for clarifying that. That's it. That's all I have.
Well, when I was hired as airport manager, they knew that Viber Aviation, I was married to him.
Sure.
And they didn't feel it was conflict at that time.
Thank you.
Okay. Other counselors? Shelley?
Sure, so this is me, I'm searching for more information because I don't know the answer to it. So, and you may have talked about it and I may not have caught it all. So, so it sounds like, maybe let me back up. Because again, I'm searching for more information. So I know, so if individuals rent like an apartment, there is a cap on how much that rental can increase every year, right? So like you can't increase rent 100%, right? Because that's just not the right thing to do, and also there's some rules around that. Is there a cap on if people have, or if individuals are renting it year to year? Again, is there a cap on how much you can increase?
I don't believe so.
As long as everybody is treated equally.
Okay.
So if you have a fourplex and the tenant in A, you're going to increase their rent by $50. Then you have to increase the other three rents by $50 also.
Okay.
Right. And I might add that in my comments, I tried to keep it short at this point in the memo, but the economic damages to the city, the businesses, we don't want to drive them out. It would be like if we owned Main Street or Oregon Avenue in this case, and we could rent those out to businesses. We aren't going to just necessarily raise rents to the maximum and run everybody out of town.
Great. All right. And is there a process of annually looking at the cost of rental and making sure that that is fair, and like fair market value as well as just, we're not running people out of the airport?
Not at this time, but there will be going forward. That was one of the old CFO handled all the leases and all the adjustments, and so that got dropped when new staff came on.
Jim's in play now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Been drafted.
Yep.
I think the rest of my questions have been asked.
Okay. Misty?
Well, some of my questions have been answered as well. I think that the three of you all touched on it. But as I was listening and kind of gathering information and processing my questions, streamlined system is something that has come to my notes. And I think that will be definitely beneficial moving forward and as needed. I kind of definitely got lost on leases and contracts and insurance. That is also not my world. But I think out of this streamlining and having a system and having consistency will be really important.
Great.
Kevin?
You're looking at me. Well, in terms of the leases, I kind of had a similar reaction, as mentioned, is like, how did we not look at those and such? But I've worked for a public entity, I worked for one for 20 years, and I know exactly how that happens. And it does happen where turnover exists, where jobs are created, other jobs are dissolved, and things like that happen. So it's understandable. The goal, of course, is to learn from it, which, we're doing, and we're correcting it. That's the next thing. And then the best thing that we can do, which is always the first thing to go in a busy organization, is documentation. So how do we document the process for the next people? How do we do a favor for the next people that come along and inherit those duties and such like that? So I would encourage that. And as far as the program goes, and for tracking the leases, I also know, you mentioned that $20,000, and I think that just happens to be like what the maximum amount is before you have to go to an RFP. So that's probably why it's priced at $20,000, and I wouldn't pay that much money either for something that's tracking, how many leases? 50?
75.
75,
Wow.
so, yeah.
75.
Yeah, Excel is good, Outlook reminders are good. There's probably some stuff that if you talk to the Next Step guys that do our thing, they can probably help you hook your Office 365 to do a little automation, stuff like that. You don't need to spend that kind of money, so I applaud that you're not doing that.
Okay. So, we've talked about the number of 75 has come out, 75 leases approximately. And then on page 2, it refers to 5 leases that were purchased during the past 4 years. So are there approximately 75 total leases and 5 that have been kept current because those are new, while the other 70 are the ones that have not been kept current?
Okay, so 75 accounts. So 75 accounts in the city database. Of that, 5 of them are rentals that we have purchased in the last 5 years that have a separate lease that was not looked at. We signed the paperwork, we didn't put it on our list to review annually. So those need to be updated. And then there's 6 of them that are for the
6 of the 70 remaining?
6 out of the 70, yeah. So there's, now, I just lost my train of thought. So 5 of them that we rent, that we bought, we purchased the leases early, so we actually own them and we have renters in those. And then there's 6 that are office, that are in the main building. There are 6 accounts there. So there's Viper Aviation, there's Flying D, there's ERD, Research and Development, and ATA. And then the city, of course, has the airport manager's office and the pilot's lounge.
And
So-
those 6 have not been looked at for 25 years?
No, they were looked at once when Mr. Petiti was mayor, and I believe there was a rate increase at that time. But since that time, it has not been, they have not been reviewed.
So 75 minus 11 leaves 64. So we're saying the other 64 have not been looked at for 25 years.
The other 64 are the ones that are adjusted every year per CPI index, and we're tied to those 40 years. We can't do anything with those.
So of the 75, 64 are tied into an annual review that the council approves.
An annual rate adjustment.
That is part of the budget process, 64. 5 are new that we acquired, and 6, but 1 includes the city,
No, 6 plus the city.
6 plus the city. So we're talking about 6 that haven't been looked at for 25 years.
20, probably.
So,
And none of them, I'm sorry. to
hang on,
interrupt, none
I'm
of
trying to
them
wrap my head
are
around this.
by-
75 total, 5 over here that are only 4 years old, 6 that are 20 to 25 years old, and 64 that do get looked at every year just in terms of the CPI adjustment.
They get adjusted,
But the lease itself could be changed.
no,
So how many total leases do we need to look at and update? 6,
11,
11, the 5 and the 6.
correct.
So we're talking about at the airport, we have a total of 11 leases that need to be updated, redrafted, whatever.
And for point of clarification, ERD is less than a year old, so that one has been written. So it's one of the newer ones. Flying D, Dorothy, when did you?
You know what, my rate goes up every year. My office rate. It's time,
No, the safety fee goes up every year.
and
That's not your lease. You're $86, and then $15 for electricity. And then your
Well,
safety
it
fee
looked
goes
like
up
it was
every year.
going up every
Yes,
year.
your safety fee goes up every year, but I'm trying to
so the
think.
Flying D is the overall LLC, but take away as a DBA under that. So it's the same company.
When did you start renting 4 and 5?
Oh, God.
So that's when yours were last updated.
4 or 5 years ago.
So hers isn't quite as old either.
So I'm just trying to wrap my head around, when I think of 75, I think, wow, that's a lot that we've let lapse. When I think of 11, then I think, okay, we still let 11 lapse, but it gives me a different perspective than 75. So that's just clarification for me.
And the 6 are just within the last 4 years, and 1 is not lapsed. 1 is still current through December. 2, ERD is still current through December. And then there's 4 that have expired, 2 this last summer, and then the others 2 years ago, 2 years ago. So those do have to be rewritten and updated. And then as far as leases that haven't been touched, it would be Viper Aviation, About Time Aviation. I think those are the only 2 because they haven't changed since '97.
Okay. So I still have more questions, but if you have a question that's pertinent to this particular point, then you had your hand
Yes,
raised.
just-
Alonzo and then
just-
Tammy.
Sorry, just clarify before I forget my, that you said leases and then you said no, and accounts. What's that?
Okay.
What do you mean there?
So the city bills via accounts. So there's 75 airport accounts. So it may mean a business has 3 or 4 accounts.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, thank you.
Okay.
So what you were just talking about is they've been reviewed in 2 years, they've been reviewed in 4 years. None of them have ever been reviewed by our city attorney.
He wrote them.
He wrote all of them that are for the owned buildings and the offices.
The 6, or
The 6.
I'm sorry, the 5 that we
The
purchased.
5 that we
He
purchased.
wrote the grant, the contracts.
Awesome. And then the 6 offices, has Ross ever looked at those?
Yes, he has. He reviewed the office 3, 4, and 5 when they were updated about 5 years ago. Michelle had Ross work with Dorothy
Okay,
to update the leases.
okay.
Um,
So half of those.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So, this is on, let's see here.
And actually, I need to clarify, we actually have a row of T hangers that have not been looked, trying to think, I think they're all on the old form that was created by Creswell Airport Inc.
Okay, so on the 4th page, under Mr. Dolan's concerns, the first one, it says, this is about the 5th sentence down. Further, according to Article 11.04 Creswell Airport Rules, the Airport Commission conducts a biannual review of the minimum standards. So that means every 2 years, the Airport Commission reviews it. So When was the last time that review was done? Was it done this year or
This-
last year?
Was this draft. When they reviewed all the rules and regulations.
this year.
It is part of the rules and regulations.
Okay, so do you know if that has been done consistently every 2 years?
I believe it has. I know you charged us to look at them when Sid was chair. So I want to say it was probably 4 years ago was the last time we looked at them.
Okay, so that, to me, that was an important point here, that, and, you know, kind of it's like what you said earlier about how we have this written down someplace in a document, but who remembers it? And probably you're the one who has to remember it, because everybody else can change.
And yeah, and I mean, there's a lot to try and remember.
Yeah. So, it was interesting to me, I got an education on FBOs by reading the minimum standards. I thought all through the years that an airport had one FBO. But now I learned there are multiple FBOs. I think you said 10 of them.
Yes, we have 10
Fixed base
businesses.
operators is here a number of times. And it makes the statement on Article 13 that the city is the primary aeronautical service by providing fuel. So there are multiple FBOs at the airport, and I suppose if I had any background, I could go out to there, and if I could rent a hangar, I could become an FBO if I had an aeronautical thing I did.
If
Which
you had
I don't.
accreditation, correct.
But if I could figure out how to do it. So there's multiple FBOs. I thought there was only one until I read this today. But the city is the primary for providing fuel services. We do that.
And maintaining the airport.
And we own the airport.
And the contracts and everything, yes.
I also found interesting reading through here under Article 12. This is in the minimum standards, where it talks about the goal of the city is straightforward. Did you all read that? I want to point this out. This is page 28, under the minimum standards. Article 12, employee conduct and customer service emphasis. The city of Creswell works diligently to provide high-quality services to the needs and requests of airport users. As such, the city requires its commercial operators, businesses, and tenants to do the same. The city has the opportunity to position its airport as a high-quality airport facility where customers and users have their needs met with and exceeded. Consequently, the goal of the city is straightforward, offer the tenants and users of the airport commercial operators that provide high-quality customer service by meeting and exceeding customer needs through consistent, responsive, and professional service. So I thought that was, really well stated. City has a goal at the airport, straightforward. Let's see here. And then under 13.07 FBO services, fueling, it states right off the bat, the city of Creswell is the sole provider of retail fueling services. So my observation was that's the one, ownership of the airport isn't going to change, and fueling services isn't going to change. But all kinds of other FBOs could change, and I don't find anything in here that says the city must provide the airport lounge. It seemed like somebody else could open a lounge out there, or maybe multiple lounges. But nobody else is going to provide fuel or own the airport and manage it. So, counselors, anything else you want to bring up? Question you want to ask? If not, then we're going to take a brief recess, because we've been sitting for 2 hours. And we'll come back in 3-4 minutes, okay?
When is the December public safety? So it's set for January?
New lane termination, mayor in charge of the committee.
Oh,
So, every January you have your chart.
Oh, name each other, because say Shelley and I will.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm so poor. Thank you.
So that's just confirming.
So, have you been asked what you're gonna do with all your spare time?
Yes.
Did you laugh just like that?
Oh, I already know what I'm gonna do. I have plans.
Oh, I guess we have to be careful, this is all still on.
Yeah.
Just like anybody in the room.
Do some stuff at home. Take a little break.
Yeah, yeah.
Move around a
And,
little
and
bit.
you? You get the same?
Yeah, I mean, I have plenty of things to direct my energy and time. It's,
Same here?
and, but at the same time, I'm just looking at it like, I was just kind of getting good at it.
It takes a while, doesn't it?
does, yeah.
Yeah, you gotta get your groove. So,
Those first couple of years, you're like, yeah, I don't know how I'm doing it. Whatever they say.
right? Just gonna kinda watch.
100% sure that I expected, which is.
Yeah. It'll be weird.
Well, I guess I have you to thank really, because you're the one that asked me to be your budget partner back when we were doing it that
We were
way.
doing, yeah.
And I was horrible because I missed my first meeting.
No.
And I vowed that I would never miss another meeting, and I haven't. But you kind of gave me my chance, really.
Look what came out of it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, just
Yeah.
letting you know.
That's how they
We all have to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So, it's been a ride.
A lot of stuff coming up, it's gonna be a
Yeah.
challenge.
Interesting things. And you know, I think maybe some time pass and reevaluate and see.
Yeah, yeah.
I got some gardening to do and some cooking and
We're probably been neglected because,
Absolutely.
yeah, I feel the same way.
yeah.
Okay, we're missing Norma. Norma, we're ready to start.
The RV is there. Let's do this.
I think we're all ready to start.
That's right.
I'm powering through, I can actually use the bathroom, but everybody was
If
busy.
you need to go now, we're having hold your peace.
Can make a joke. I'm gonna power through.
All right, we are reconvening. So now we are going to have an opportunity for members of the public here to speak to the council on this subject. So who in the back row wants to speak to this subject? I'm going to ask you stand up, state your name, and then get your clock up for 5 minutes. Okay?
I think I'll pass.
Anyone? I know we have some
Well, there
people.
was one here. He's just out walking around.
Okay. Then anyone else in the back row? Dorothy, did you want to speak to this subject?
Sure.
All right, Dorothy, stand up. State your name. Do you need address for the record?
No.
Okay.
Dorothy Schick, S-C-H-I-C-K. In no particular order, I'm going to respond to some of the things I've heard tonight. First of all, now that you all know what an FBO is, I guarantee that will not be on the test for the private pilot. So you guys have to put yourselves back 27 years ago to this city, which was a small city, and understand that, as many of you have already said, you know, things have changed over time. You've become a bigger city. But back then, there wasn't a lot of money in the city. There was a lot of things were, as I used to say, old boys network. It's a lot of change, and that's for the better. A lot of things for the better. One of the things I do want to stress is that because the FAA is involved in everything we business owners in aviation have to do, that there is a whole level of rules and regs that you're not aware of, right? And why would you be? One is that if we bring additional, say, another flight school to the airport, just be aware that if they want to be what you call a 141 school, which is a school that would be authorized by the FAA to have their own, it's a little higher authorization, right? Before that, they get their own testing, self-testing, and it's just very complicated. They have to have a lot of more rules at the school. They have to have the FAA come in and look at everything every year. For that, the FAA requires a minimum of a 6-month lease for say a school building, a building. So just be aware of that. So when we talk about temporary, or one of the things that Shelley and I had worked on years ago was, hey, if I wanted to have my school registered as a Part 141 school, I couldn't do it with a month-to-month lease. Couldn't do it. The FAA would not allow it. And it takes the FAA about 4 to 5 years to authorize a 141 school. Okay, so just, it literally does. So just so you know that going forward, that if you are going to bring in additional businesses, which I hope you do, and flight schools they buy fuel, you know, important thing, especially once you get water, you're able to build more buildings and bring in more business, that rental agreement, let's call it a rental agreement, or lease agreement, if you're going to make them temporary, they have to make them at least 6 months temporary. Right? Otherwise, as far as addressing sort of rate increases, you know, aviation, again, is kind of like retail businesses where there's such a fine line of cost to benefit. And as soon as we think things are going well, avgas goes up. You know, as soon as they think everything's going to be great, all of a sudden, price of parts go up, or you can't get parts. So just bear in mind when you do look at the costs that you're going to be looking at for rental or lease rates, that in aviation, we're working at very, very slim margins. We all know that our rates are going to go up for our insurance next year, even though nothing in Oregon really had caused a problem, but we've had hurricanes, we've had issues with tornadoes tearing apart airplanes all over the country, and that's going to reflect back on the costs that we pay for liability insurance, for our building insurance. So just bear in mind that just because your rental rate or lease rate is maybe middle of the road here, we have so many other costs to bear. So just those two things to bear in mind when you're looking at this. Otherwise, you know, airport rules, minimum standards vary all over the country. I mean, I've been in aviation for more than 40 years, and some places don't have any minimum standards, written rules. Other places have, and it's so difficult to work with that they turn away businesses. So this airport has done a good job of trying to find that line of, okay, you know, we have people who come in as flight instructors and they're just part-time and they don't even have really a desk, right? But they're there to help someone that they're brought in from from Alaska or wherever. So are they required to have a business name? Not necessarily. They came in for Aurora. They came from some other place. So we can't have a rule that excludes this kind of gig environment that aviation has become in many ways. Just bear that in mind. Okay?
Thank you.
For that?
Anyone else in the back row that would like to speak? You have 5 minutes. Okay, front row on the left end. Front row. Front row.
Pilot's left. Okay. I wanted to read.
Tell us your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Jeff Whiteley.
Jeff Whiteley.
Last name is Color White and then L-E-Y. I'm not based here. Wish I was, because I love this place. But can I read a statement from somebody who couldn't be here as part of my time? Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay.
Tell us the name.
His name is Kyle Bushman, Ragwood Refractory Bushman Built. Dear City of Crestwell Council members, my name is Kyle Bushman. I was unable to attend this evening's meeting as I am in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, for work. I'm 29 years old and I've operated my business out of Crestwell Airport since 2015, but have been flying privately since I was 14. I got my first job in 2009 in a maintenance facility at Hobbyfield, which later led me to obtain my A&P mechanic rating at Lane Community College. Shortly after I graduated, I returned to Hobbyfield where I knew my business could thrive. These days, I operate as an A&P mechanic with an inspector's authorization rating, but also specialize in aircraft restoration, maintenance, and enhancements for all pilots across the U.S. I planted my roots at Crestwell Hobbyfield 15 years ago and plan to operate at the airport for another 30 years, if the lease goes that far, I'm sure. I strive to be the best neighbor, advocate, and promoter of Crestwell and our airfield. Hobbyfield is a great place, and our airport manager is good at what she does, as I have seen vast improvements throughout my time, including our most recent upgrade of the new runway. All of the businesses at the airport get along and operate well. I want everyone to feel welcome in our community so newcomers can take advantage of the vast opportunities that our airfield has to offer. I have 50 useful years to promote aviation and make sure people remember to have fun when flying. I'm proud to call Hobbyfield my home airport and determined to continue putting our city of Crestwell on the map. It feels silly making a list of my accomplishments and handing them to you tonight, but I do think it's important to recognize the successes and opportunity that this airport has put forward in me. A few achievements I'm most proud of. He was nominated Aircraft Maintenance Technology Magazine's 40 Under 40 Maintenance Professional Award winner in 2018, runner-up of Bronze Age class 36 to 41 award at Oshkosh, the world's largest air show. Received the honor, the American Spirit Award in 2019 at the Aviation Community Excellence Assembly, a red carpet event. Passing on the Passion, a 5-page article in EAA Sport Aviation Magazine, 200,000 issues printed. The cover of AOPA Pilots Magazine, June 2020, which was the airplane him and I built together. On the cover of Flying Magazine, again, our airplanes, 200,000 issues printed there. Airbuds, a 4-page article in Portland Magazine. World's first Cessna was Slats, a 7-page article in Plane and Pilot Magazine, May 20. And Accelerated Course, a 5-page article in Flying Magazine, printed. Backcountry, 8-page article in EAA Sport Aviation Magazine, February of 2019, and 2,000 issues printed. Crestwell Airport has proven that there are good times and rough times, but the airport has always has a way of making it through to the other side. Sincerely, Kyle Bushman. I think it's important to say that these are young people that have based in Crestwell for a reason. Some of them grew up here, others flocked here. I don't know if you guys know how special that the Hobbyfield is. You can't take your kids to Eugene and walk up to the fuel pumps and talk with a pilot or a mechanic. It's very exclusive. It's fenced, There's people that sit out there and watch jets, and I go talk to them all the time and try to get kids excited, but it's just not accessible. Crestwell is so unique that it's so accessible to people to come up and feel general aviation when you show interest. And it's important that we, as aviators and mechanics and everybody, embrace that. When you see the younger or somebody who's excited to come, learn about aviation. I learned, my first incentive flight was here as a kid. Later on, I came back to skydive. I learned to fly with Dorothy. Achieved a private pilot certificate, and I continue coming back here training on a regular basis. Now, I'm based in Salem. I own a hangar there, and believe me, they have big problems. You guys don't have the problems that Salem has. The hangars there are full of non-aviation activities, and we're all dying for more hangar space, but they don't enforce it there like they do, like you guys have. You guys have a handle on the enforcement, not enforcement, I want to say, how it should be done through the FAA requirements. As I said, we got a couple magazine articles, a couple cover stories from the airplane we built together, and it put Crestwell on the map as far as in our industry. I still get people calling and saying, hey, where'd you build that airplane? In a little town called Crestwell. Where's that? And it's really fun to see how it became a place for people to come to because it's so accessible and because there's so much talent on the airport. Am I running out of time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Anyway, they've done an amazing job. The Creswell Airport's amazing. Just keep doing what you're doing. We're all very happy to be here and continue to come back.
All right, thank you. Okay. Next in the back row. Go ahead.
I'm in the front row.
Front row.
I'm Darren Humble, Viper Aviation. I would just like to add to what Jeff said there. Kyle Bushman's one of the most positive things that's happened to Creswell Airport. He's incredibly positive. He gives kids rides in airplanes. He's an ambassador for aviation, and the fact that he's on this airport, and Jeff's exactly right. He is putting Creswell Airport on the map worldwide because these publications are talking about. You know, Flying Magazine is in every country, aviation country. I worked in New Zealand back in the early 90s. They got Flying Magazine down there. His airplane, and you know, that airplane's been seen everywhere in the world, thanks to Kyle Bushman and his influence on this industry and this airport. To give you a little bit of background of the aircraft, there's 4 maintenance facilities out there and a support maintenance facility. And to give you a little background of aviation in general, we differ from cars because you try to get work done on a car locally. I have customers that bring airplanes to me from Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and California. Kyle has customers that bring airplanes to him from the Midwest. Kyle's client base is worldwide. I'm just kind of Western United States. The uniqueness about our maintenance facilities, where we have essentially 5 different businesses. We have 4 maintenance facilities and a support facility, or we have three maintenance facilities and a support. We all have different talents and we all complement each other and we utilize each other's services. We're direct competitors, but Kyle uses my, I use Kyle's talents, he uses my talents. Tony Horvath out there as well. Gary's been an incredible asset to my business because the non-destructive testing on engine stuff and engine machining used to be a 2-week wait. His turn times for me is a 1 to 2 days, and it saves shipping, and so he's been an incredible asset to my business. And the fact that we're pulling, I have these customers, and Kyle has these customers that bring customers in from different states. Those people are spending money in this town, and they're spending, they're buying fuel. I have a letter or a note from a customer that I've had for going on 22 years. But just the positive aspect. You hear a lot of negative things about this airport. The positive aspect is, in my industry, is the way we all work together. Is in one cohesive unit to help each other stay in business. We are direct competitors, but we are all helping each other, stay alive in this, because it can be, stay alive in this thing. And we all have more work than we know what to do with. We could all grow and expand. I don't want to grow and expand. I want to stay, my size. This is a letter which I'll give to people from Curtis Madison. I started working on his airplanes back in 2021. He said, I'd like to offer my support to Creswell Airport. I've been doing business at the airport for 21 years. The facilities have been instrumental in the utility of my aircraft, my business. I have purchased, thankfully, at least $60,000 worth of fuel from the city. I'm also a tenant and run a hangar in the city. I initially came to Creswell 77S to have Viper Aviation maintain my aircraft. Viper has done all my maintenance and is an excellent airport asset. The airport has seen great upgrades and maintenance. We now have an AWAS, an instrument approach, and a new runway surface, lighting, and more. As a result, this is a result of a lot of work and well done by your airport manager, respectively, Curtis Madison. And with respect to him and these upgrades at the airport, such as the AWAS and the instrument approach, Curtis keeps one of his airplanes here in Creswell and another airplane he keeps up there in Corvallis. For him to be able to bring his airplane in and have the instrument approach to do it in the wintertime is critical, because sometimes it would take days for us to be able to get the airplane transferred down. And the instrument approach and the AWAS, the weather reporting system, has been, It's helped me, it's helped my customers, and it's been an incredible asset to my business. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Anyone else in the front row? Yes.
Yes. My name is Joshua Levi, and I just have a short prepared statement so I don't wander and forget what I'm talking about, taking up all your valuable time. I am A&P IA, which is Airframe Power Plants with Inspection Authorization Mechanic. I work for, I'm a helicopter field mechanic, and I work for Hillsborough Aviation. I've been working in aviation since 2011. I've traveled all over the world in the United States in the course of my career. I've been through some of the largest and well-known airports, such as Mumbai, India, and Charles de Gaulle in Paris, as well as some of the smallest and most remote airports like Mayo, Yukon Territory, and Nervino Airport in Portola, California. And most of them have one thing in common. They are not very inviting to the general public. Aviation in the U.S., especially general aviation, is dying. I blame the reaction to the events of September 11th, as well as the high cost of entry into the fraternity of flight. What is the first thing you see at most airports? Police or fences. Not very welcoming. I got into aviation later in life and never even considered working in aviation as a kid because I thought that's what rich people did. In my early 30s, I decided to get my A&P. Kyle Bushman was one of the first people I met in college while we were working towards our licenses. We immediately became friends. Years later, I would work with him for about a year at the Ragwood Refactory restoring antique airplanes. I went back into helicopter maintenance, where I am today at Hillsborough Aviation, but Kyle and I have always remained close friends, and Kyle's like a brother to me. The Creswell Airport is a great airport. I have worked here, flown in and out of here in both airplanes and helicopters. I've gone skydiving here multiple times, brought company helicopters as well as my fuel truck here to buy thousands of dollars worth of Jet A. I am a helicopter mechanic / fuel truck driver, and my truck carries about 800 gallons of Jet A, which is about 2.5 days of fuel. So that's about, at your current rate of $5.99 a gallon, that's about $4,800 worth of fuel. And if we're on a fire, I can be going through that every few days. And it's my discretion where I bring the helicopter, where I bring the fuel truck, and so I like coming here. And I bring it here for the Jet A as opposed to other helicopters for one main reason. My friends are invested in this airport. Kyle Bushman, Ken Schmidt, Tony Horvath, Larry Davis, rest in peace, are all people that I've spent time with and flown with here in Creswell. As a field mechanic and fuel truck driver, like I said, I decide where I buy my fuel, and Creswell is the place when I'm in the area. It has I-5 frontage, which is awesome because the general public knows that Creswell has an airport. Some great and unique airplanes that you don't see other places. A nice runway, self-serve fuel, which is important because I work 24 hours a day. And the first thing I see at the Creswell Airport is airplanes and smiling faces, not fences. Creswell Airport is helping aviation grow, not die. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else who would like to speak to the council tonight? Okay. Then councilors. Are there things that you picked up that you would like to direct back to Manager Amberg? So we received an email today from Mr. Dolan, and that will go in correspondence for the December 12 council meeting. It will also go to Manager Amberg for her review. Question?
I believe Manager Amber was asking for a copy. Do you have a spare copy?
I believe this was emailed to Manager Amberg.
I'm sorry.
I was asking if he had seen it. I had not.
Shelley.
Oh, I gave you a copy earlier today, right? So all I have is my copy. So, and mine, and I just yelled on it, so. You, Grace, you have a copy, right?
I can forward.
Between the two of you, can you get one to Shelley? Okay, so this will be in correspondence packet for December 12th council meeting. And it will go to Manager Amber, of course, for her review. So the question to the council is, are there things coming out of our discussion tonight that you want to direct to Manager Amberg for her attention?
Just, I'm sure will come to us at their earliest convenience is the auditing process that these leases are going to be going through. I would be very curious to see that report when and if, whenever that is done.
Sure.
Okay. Other things that you want to make sure that Manager Amber, so Grace is keeping all these records tonight, and Jim is, and we'll make sure that anything we bring up goes to Manager Amber, so she'll have it and know that coming out of this, we said we'd like to follow up on this. So this is the first one, auditing. Kevin?
I'd like to have a follow-up of just the roles and responsibility documentation that I mentioned earlier, that we ensure that does take place, so that, again, it's the gift to the people of the future that will do your jobs.
A policy.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
I would like to have a timeline for when we're going to be having the audits and when we see ourselves updating the leases. I'd like some kind of a timeline on when that's going to happen.
Do you know when the leases, the auditor's gonna be done?
They have to be done by December 31st. They usually present that audit report to the council as early as February, probably more likely March.
Do you see us reviewing the leases and updating those after the audit's completed? Will that be the process?
I think we should do the review of the leases monthly. Before the audit, I would like to wait until after we get the work papers back from the auditors, because I think we can use the work papers that they prepared. And I think that would be a huge benefit to us, is to use their work and not reinvent the wheel. So I don't think until after the audit is done, we'll have that automated document in place. The policies and procedures we can start writing right away. And I think that should be done monthly. I think a monthly check-in when we do the billing is appropriate. It shouldn't take very long if we have a system of reviewing that's somewhat automated.
And I think we can work with Ross right away and look at the leases that need to be updated.
Well, and again, I'm not asking tonight for when. I'm just saying I would like at some point soon to have a timeline presented to the council. Here,
Okay.
you know, we've outlined at least 3 different things that are going to happen: renewing contracts, certificates of insurance, making sure we have all those, and then the process of making sure that the leases are regularly reviewed. So just to know, you know, some sense of the time frame for when these things are going to happen, so that we as a council can get that report and stay on top of that.
Yeah, I think spring of 2023.
And we can put a timeline together for you.
Yeah, mainly
That
I want this to go to Manager Amber.
Yes.
This is her work.
Yeah, well,
Because
We're just trying to pitch in
then
for
she
it.
delegates it to all of her staff.
Right.
But we don't
We don't
delegate it to the
delegate
staff.
you, yeah.
sure.
We're delegating it to Manager Amberg. Okay, other things, council, that you want to make sure go on Manager Amberg's desk.
I think, you know, one of the things that we've read in a number of emails, and I think was asked tonight as well, is around conflict of interest. And so if there could be something written, documented, something that we can point to about, here's what is a conflict of interest, here's what is not a conflict of interest, so that we have clear guidance, or that staff have clear guidance.
Okay? Good. So again, that goes to Manager Amberg. We're wanting some clarification on conflict of interest. Okay, other counselors? Okay, then we will conclude this item. And we will go to, and Ross, thank you very much for coming tonight.
Absolutely.
And we hope you have a safe drive home, and we don't see you till January, February. Have a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you, Mayor.
Enjoy your time with your family.
Thanks, Ross.
Okay, so we're going to move to item D, which is airport rules and regulations. So we're going to take just a minute, council, for you to put away your notes, hold on to the spreadsheet, that Manager Humble gave us, and all these other things we have here. Give me just a second here. Okay. Airport rules and regulations, complaint process and penalties. Shelley.
So at our last work session in October, I was asked to look at other airports to see a request from the audience. They asked if we would consider putting penalties or fines. And council asked that I do a review, investigate what other airports of our size are doing. And before you are the results of those queries. I did to airports that are equal to or close to us. There is only 2 that have any type of violations. One is Corvallis.
Have penalties?
Have penalties or fines. And they are handled through the municipal code. And the State Department of Aviation has civil penalties, but they only the only airport that they look at is Aurora because it's a controlled airport. They have 28 airports. I mean, some of them are a runway, no buildings, no fuel, no nothing, nobody there. So for the most part, they don't look at fining or most everything that I have found, really, they tie it to the lease. For example, Newport, they have in their rules and regulations, failure to abide could be grounds for termination of lease, suspension and or revocation of access and or punishment through applicable federal, state, local law. If refusal to comply, they may be regarded as a trespasser. The Newport Police or other designated airport, designated people by the airport director shall have full authority to enforce these rules and regulations. So it really depends on the size and staff. I mean, like us, most airports might have 1 staff member, might have half, they may be volunteer. I believe Florence is back to, can't remember, they had an airport manager, budget couldn't hold the manager, so then they went to voluntary people, and I think now they're back to having a manager again, but they didn't respond to any queries. So, staff's opinion is to, when we revise the agreements that we can revise, I believe they all say that we have to follow the rules and regulations. I have not had anyone that was in violation not fix it so that they're not in violation. I've not had any blatant, I'm not going to do this. So I think if we just put a clause, the rules and regulations spell it out pretty clearly. And then the leases, I do believe even the land leases state that they have to follow all the rules and regulations. So my recommendation is not to institute any fines or penalties at this time. Should it become a problem down the road, then I think that's something that we could look at. But we don't have the staff. I'm not quite sure whether or not we'd include it as part of our municipal code. And then it gets to, I mean, anytime I've had a serious issue, I've called Lane County Sheriff. And they look at our rules and then they either remove the people from the airport property, which we've had to do a couple of times, way back when. But for the most part, once they realize that they're in violation, they do whatever corrective action they have to take to not be in violation.
Okay. Council members, questions, comments? Misty?
What would be an example of a violation?
It could be taking off when the airport's closed. We've had 2 incidences that happened. You counsel them, you ask them to get retraining by a CFI, and then they re-educate themselves. Part of the NOTAMs that we do are in Zulu time and not local time. So in one instance, that was the confusion. It could be camping without prior authorization. You're allowed to camp on the airport, but you have to fill out a form. So if that should happen and it comes to someone complains or I catch it or Joel catches it. Joel is more the eyes and the ears. I'm usually working on paperwork, doing grants. Then we would educate them and get them in compliance. Okay.
So this is a follow-up to Misty's question. You made the statement when the airport's closed, but earlier we heard that you work 24/7, and so you could come into the airport whenever you need to and get your fuel. But if their airport's closed, then how does that work?
Okay, definition of airport closed is the runway is closed. So it's closed to aeronautical activity. At any time, someone can come, go to their hangar, it's never closed.
Helicopters don't need a runway.
So the airport is never closed to a helicopter?
Well, it was during the runway rehabilitation because of contractors. There was construction workers all over. So it was completely closed aeronautical activity. Most of the time, if something closes, it's usually, for example, we'll be closing it we have to do one more striping of the runway, of the new runway. It had to be 30 days after the first painting. So it will be like a one-day closure. So it would just be to aeronautical activity. It doesn't mean that people can't still come to the airport, go to their hangars, go get fuel in a fuel truck if that's what they need. It just means that the runway, aeronautical activity is closed.
So this is probably a dumb question. All you pilots just close your ears. I mean, most businesses are 8 to 5 or 10 to 7 or whatever. Does the airport, after dark, are they closed in the morning when it's too dark or after dark at night?
There's no set times.
So you can fly in at 10:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning?
Correct.
So the airport doesn't have open and closed hours that way?
Correct.
The airport's closed when the runway is closed for some reason?
Right, and it's NOTAMed.
Okay.
That was my question.
It's NOTAMed and under construction, the only time, so the FAA requires us to put crosses out if able. Like the last snowstorm that we had last December, we were unable to put the crosses out because of the snow. So I did a NOTAM, which is the Notice to Airmen. Since that time, it used to be that if there was snow in any portion of the runway and you had no ability to remove that snow to make it safe for landing, you had to close the runway. The FAA has now instituted a new system so that we don't have to. We can split the runway up in 3 pieces and we can tell you what the conditions are on each 3 pieces so we no longer have to close for that reason, unless it's to the point where it's so bad that it's not safe to land.
Okay. So Misty, I think you had asked the question originally. Do you have any additional questions you want to follow up with?
I don't think so at this point, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
That's okay.
Someone else?
No, I had the same question. What does it mean it's closed?
Okay.
That was my question.
So,
just to clarify, fuel is available 24/7. It's self-service. So they know the one gate is not locked. We don't have fences all the way around the airport. So if an aviator needs to come get fuel, Life Flight is probably our biggest purchaser in the middle of the night. If they go on a run and they have to fill up, they fill up with us before they go back to Cottage Grove. Or they end up being weathered in, so they'll be on our airport overnight.
Okay. So I noticed, it looks like Grants Pass and Myrtle Creek are identical.
Myrtle Creek's pretty, there's not much there, but yes, as far as pricing.
No, I'm talking about penalties. So
Oh,
both
I'm
of
sorry,
them,
yes.
they both have the same policy, it looks like. They send a letter, they have 30 days to correct it or be removed. Both. And then it looks like Newport also says it could be grounds for termination of lease, suspension, revocation of access. So at least 3 of them say if you don't correct this within 30 days, you can be removed from the airport.
Correct.
You can lose your lease. So I'm not saying that, that needs to be part of our policy, but I just noticed there are some consistent language there, a little bit of teeth in it. If you've got a letter, you've been talked to, and 30 days have elapsed and you know it, then.
Correct, and I don't remember the land leases. It says that you have to follow all the rules and regulations, but I'm not sure if it speaks to revocation. Those are the land leases we're tied to for 40 years. So we don't have a lot of wiggle room on those 60, is that what we figured out, 60 leases?
Something like that.
Yeah,
60.
so we don't have wiggle room on those.
Okay.
But I can double check and make sure that if there is verbiage, I can bring that back to you.
Okay. Other counselors, questions, comments? Okay, members, Shelley?
Sorry, I was just gonna ask a question. So it looks like the only area that says, here's how much it's gonna be, so $2,500 per occurrence is the Oregon Department of Aviation. And it also says that Aurora is the only airport that is controlled. Do we have an estimate as to how many times a fine has been?
I
How
did not,
effective has
I
that
did
been?
not ask that question. And Aurora is kind of a beast on its own because it's got an industrial park on one end and aviation. So it's a real big mix of different businesses. I could definitely ask that question.
I guess the reason I was asking that is because if we need improvement to be made, or if we need a change to be made in how folks are doing their business, is that an effective way of going about changing behavior? Or is it, and also there's this fine?
Most that I've talked to, like Primeville, the city didn't feel that it would accomplish anything.
So at the very top it says TOFA, TLOFA. I'm sure all the other counselors know what those acronyms stand for, but I don't have any idea.
Okay, so that was part of the handout that Mr. Dolan gave you last week about parking in front of your hangars.
What do they stand for?
So TOFA is taxiway, object-free area, and TLOFA is taxi lane. So we have one taxiway that leads to the runway, and then we have lots of taxi lanes that get you to your hangars. So most airports our size, smaller, even Eugene allows tenants to park near their hangar. It is within the TOFA and the TLOFA. Grant Assurances states that if you take grant money, then you have to follow that. If you don't take grant money, you don't have to follow that advisory circular. And actually, I wrote up something last week, and I will, hopefully this will help you understand. So this airport's operated on the premise that hangar owners/renters were allowed to park next to their hangar so long as they did not hinder the aircraft movement, which is bringing your airplane out of your hangar, going to get fuel or going to take off, and then coming back. I have confirmed with the few users at the airport that this practice has been in place since they were here, starting in the mid-1970s. This practice is utilized at many small airports across the U.S. The airport's purview is to utilize available property for airplane hangars and tie-downs, not automobile parking lots. Until receipt of the enclosed email on October 23rd, 2022, the airport during my employment, 23-plus years, has never received an email regarding the TOFA and TLOFA, nor an email stating that, and I quote, "is a serious safety concern." During my employment, there has never been a safety accident or incident due to the vehicles parking in the TOFA or the TLOFA, and that this is not an unusual practice at most GA airports across the USA. I have had several FAA inspections and have never received a violation. If the FAA were to come and inspect today and vehicles were parked adjacent to their hangars and a safety concern had been received, they would review the circular with the management and discuss corrective actions available. The FAA believes in retraining, not violating, unless the safety concern was egregious and a serious accident or incident had occurred after several warnings with no corrective action put into place. Upon receipt of this email, I started looking at the serious safety concerns. The easy answer, I can inform all the users that the TOFA and TLOFA is to remain free of cars, water tanks, picnic tables, etc. However, I wish I could say that the answer was easy, but unfortunately it is not. It will affect one of the businesses on the field and the way they have been operating their business. I have been conferring with the city's engineer to see if there is a possible exception, but we have found none. I believe my next course of action is to enlist the FAA for help. I do have a great working relationship with both offices and value their expertise. So what I'm trying, and I can pass this around. So this is the taxiway, runway. This is a taxi lane. So OFA area from taxiway, from the center line of the taxiway is 44 feet. It's to remain clear. A taxi lane is 39 and a half feet from center line. So this is Eugene Skydivers. Unfortunately, they have 3 tie downs right through both, and they would lose part of their apron, and they do utilize this taxi lane, even though it's a dead end to nowhere. Eventually it will go to the next hangar and up north, the further development. And they load and unload there. So if I enforce it for one, I have to enforce it for all. So I am dragging my feet a little bit because I'm trying to find a solution. And the engineer and I have been talking that we think we might be able to talk to the FAA and take this out so it's no longer a taxi lane and lease the property to the skydivers. So that would alleviate all but this area right here, which would still have to be free and clear. And I've reached out to the skydivers. I've sent them an email asking them to meet with me so that we can look this over and see if that's something that they'd be interested in. But most, as you can see, most of them don't follow the TOFA or the TLOFA. Most FAAs don't say anything. And now that we've got a safety concern, they may say that we have to follow it. And if they do, we do. But I really don't want to hurt that business. I want to find a way to make it work for them.
Okay. Thank you for explaining TOFA and TLOFA. Now we can all go home more educated than we were when we started.
Or more confused.
Okay, any member from the audience that has a comment or question? Yes. Tell us your name.
Gary Stevenson. I guess part of that got answered. I was curious why that conversation was even happening. Still somewhat unsure of that. The next question is, if I understand this right, they want us not to park next to our hangar. And if we can't park next to the hangar, where are we going to park? Because there is no parking. So maybe somebody here can answer my question. Why are we having a conversation and what is the resolution if we can't park?
Because it's on this piece of paper,
Oh.
and I didn't know what TOFA or TLOFA meant. So I asked, what does it mean? And she just explained it to me, which
And it
led to
was-
the discussion.
And it was on this paper because Mr. Dolan handed out that handout about the TOFA and the TLOFA, and he raised a serious safety concern.
So is there a complaint that we shouldn't park next to the hangar? Is that where we're at?
That was a serious safety concern was raised regarding parking a vehicle outside your hangar.
Haven't seen one in
You know, I've been around this thing for 60 years, and I've been in, well, I've flown a lot internationally too. I lived in Europe for a while and had an airplane over there. I've never been any place where I couldn't park next to the hangar. Never. And this is 10 different airports I've been based at some time or another. Big ones and little ones. And we've always gone to the hangar.
All right. Yes.
Jeff Whiteley. I too been to a lot of different airports, and it's more of a courtesy than a safety thing. I mean, we all unload and load out of our hangars. I mean, you know, you're bringing stuff in and out. You might park your car long ways while you're unloading or something, and then park it sideways thinking, okay, I want to leave room for my neighbor because that's the courtesy, right? I've been yelled at a few times because I didn't move fast enough, you know, by people, but I was thinking of it as a courtesy. And I watch for people, no matter where I'm at, whether my airplane's parked in front of a hangar because I'm in and out or chatting with someone. And if somebody needs to come in, we all just make it happen. We move, you know, it's a courtesy, you know. And I think if people would think that way instead of maybe pointing out that it's whatever it is and just say, hey, I can work with you. You work with me, I'll work with you. No problem. I'll move. It's okay. It's not a big deal. I see that everywhere.
Well, it seems like Prineville is the only airport that has an actual rule, and their rule just says no longer than 24 hours. So we're not suggesting that we have this rule. We just wanted Shelley to dig into it.
Mr. Dolan.
Yeah, I'd like to address some of this because I'm the one that brought it up, and I want to explain why we're here talking about it in the first place. And it really goes back to something that started about 2 years ago, when somebody moved into the hangar up in North End and has a helicopter. At that time, there were a lot of aircraft that would be left parked outside on the taxi lane, and that created some issues, and also vehicles. We didn't want to cause any damage to either aircraft or vehicles. And so I brought it up to the airport manager and I said, is this allowed? She said, yes, it is. That's a place that they're allowed to park. So fine, we dealt with it that way. And then the next thing we hear is that they were proposing rules to bar helicopters from operating to that part of the airport. Totally inconsistent with FAA regulations. That's what precipitated a lot of the stuff that's going on now and why a lot of these leases and everything is being looked into. Because people didn't want to play nice. And I talked to the person who had an issue with the helicopter, and I asked him if he would come to either the airport commission meeting or the city council meeting and address it, and said, we can sort it out on our own. It's not going to be a problem. We'll all behave like, you know, the way pilots do, exercising good decision-making and judgment, and deal with it on our own. But he wouldn't do that. Instead, they pushed these airport rules that would bar helicopters from operating to that airport, effectively cutting off access to somebody's hangar with his helicopter. It's still a problem because people are using the taxiway, the TLOFA, as the airport manager mentioned, to do aircraft maintenance. You don't know when the helicopter is going to be coming back in. They've said, well, just text me ahead of time and I'll move my stuff out of the way. It's not fair. So that's why there's a problem, is because people couldn't actually come to the table a couple of years ago, sit down and address it, and the airport manager didn't facilitate that discussion. Instead, she promoted making rules to bar the helicopter from operating in that area. So that's the issue.
And
Now
just
all
for-
we're asking is just to follow the FAA rules, which actually override the city's rules. So the city's rules are not really in compliance with the FAA rules. That's why we're here.
That's why you don't want people parking next to their hangar.
Okay, I want to make sure that Mr. Dolan's finished.
I could continue and address that question.
Well, we only get 5 minutes total.
So I guess I'm done then. But I think I laid it out, and if anybody wants to talk to me, I'm happy to talk.
Okay. Shelley.
Just for point of clarification, there was a concern raised by Kyle Bushman about hover taxiing to the hangar that he's talking about. And so I was tasked, the rules and regulations were due for a review. It had been more than 2 years. And so I was tasked with gathering information. I did that in good faith. Everybody had the opportunity to speak regarding the rules and regulations. And at the airport commission meeting, the 2 pieces regarding hover taxi were removed. The airport commission felt that it was in the best interest just to have the one line that's there. And I can tell you which one that is. But they removed the verbiage that I had received from other airports regarding hover taxi. We had the FAA on the phone for the meeting to talk about the differences between helicopter and rotor wash and prop wash and how they look at it, hovering between 2 hangars.
Okay, well, we are going to come back to the rules at another time, and we don't have the draft yet because it hasn't been redrafted. So we're going to hold that until we come back to it. And then at that time, between Shelley and our airport liaison, you can fill us in on the rules and regulations, okay?
So what we have in our packet is not?
What we have in our packet is unchanged from the last time you saw it.
Okay, thank you.
Totally
Because
unchanged.
I'm writing notes like, wait, what?
So-
This isn't
Only
working.
because we needed to figure out the
For
penalty
that.
fines.
Okay.
Yes.
Right, so we're
So
gonna,
what we have as this complaint form in our packet is not a suggested to be.
that's the same one you saw before.
Correct.
So the whole airport rules regulation, including the complaint form, we are waiting for that to be redrafted.
Okay.
And then whatever we discuss in terms of penalties and fines will be added or not added to that. And then we will see another draft at another work session in 2023. Some of you won't get to see that. And we'll review it again, and at some future point, we will adopt the new rules and regulations.
Correct.
Okay? All right. So, I'm about to move on to item number 6, which is adjournment. Thank you all for coming tonight.
You got a call from